We've only started with the legends in the room already, haven't we? Mr. Hurst, how are you, sir? Oh, Teams bingo. How you doing,
Good
Chris? You okay,
morning.
mate?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am absolutely amazing, mate, as per usual.
Good stuff.
I'm just going to drag this over to there so I can see who's on the. In fact, let me just do something because Teams does this really weird thing, doesn't it? I want to be able to see people when I'm on the session. So if I do that, and then I put that onto that screen. So they might see a little bit of me here if I do look towards people. That can open up again. That can go onto there. That can go onto there. And yes, lovely, jubbly. In fact, I'll put it over there. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So, hello, you lovely people. We're going to start. Probably we'll give people a couple of minutes to come in. We've got about, I think it's 34 who, after the email yesterday, have said that they're going to come on, which is good, really good numbers. I will do a full intro when they all come on. What I do ask, if possible, is could you please turn on your cameras? There's nothing worse than just speaking to. I'm in a shed. I'm in a shed in my garden, right? So it's not the same, and I like to see humans. So that's amazing. The session today is all about yourselves. We've done quite a lot of graft. There'll be an intro from Helen and from Libby. Dornan is also on from OpsPal, and she is helping us to. She's my organizer. She's dead good. So Dornan's going to make sure we stay on time and all that type of stuff. Throughout the session, there's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. So you can put your hand up, and Dornan will then go, everyone, hands up, and she'll make sure that we listen to you, etc. You can pop information into the chat if you want to, absolutely fine. Or you can use the Q&A area. So I'm stretching Dornan's ability today. She can have 3 areas to keep an eye on. For now, because we're going to have a load of people in, normally what I'd try and do is I'd normally try and say, we'll do a little intro by everyone. Okay. But there's going to be loads of people coming on. And if we all did an intro for a minute, we're going to lose 40 minutes. So if you could, just into the chat, pop your name, your role, and sort of what you're looking to get from today. That would be absolutely amazing if you could do that. How nice does Caerphilly look there, by the way? That is a background, isn't it? Not a window, just checking out.
It's my garden.
Yeah. Can't believe they're giving them special views in their offices.
No.
Your culture must be lovely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we've got a load more coming on. That's good. Wow, we've already got 25. Excellent, excellent, excellent. This I'm going to give it until about. I do weird times to start, but we'll do it at 9:33. I will kick off the session. That'll give everyone a chance to sort of come on and bits and pieces. As a little bit of I may as well start talking now, hadn't I? Because I'm good at that day. So Helen and Libby are going to do a full sort of intro to themselves in a second. But we've done a hell of a lot of work in the process of trying to pull this together. I go to a lot of organizers. So my background is I'm just an operator. That's all I've ever done. I used to work for De Vere Hotels. Then I went to Fitness First when they had about 300 sites. I was a troubleshooter, so I used to go around all different sites trying to help them. Then I went to LA Fitness. I was a national management trainer, and my job was about, again, turning around the organization. And that's all I've ever done. And then for the last 15 years or so, I've been a consultant in the leisure industry, and I've probably helped about 700 leisure centres, whether that be universities, whether it be trusts, councils, independents, private, it doesn't matter. Whoever wants my help, I'm sort of willing to give it. So I always get asked about culture, and right? We need to, now culture is one of those really strange things that it gets blamed for everything. If something goes wrong, oh, it's the culture. Or if something goes good, there's a poster in the room. So someone's got a poster in an office, and that means that the culture is good because there's a couple of pillars or whatever it may be, or there's a strategy document somewhere. Now, I was at a presentation the other week where there was a gentleman doing some training with an organization on sort of leadership, and the question kept getting asked, what is culture? And what I quickly found out is everyone was saying, oh, it's a feeling, it's about how people feel in the business. And I was sitting there thinking, yeah, it is, right? Of course it is. It's about how open and how, it is about how people feel. But how can we measure it? If I was to ask you lot, right? If I was to ask you lot, what score does your culture get? Who'd be able to answer me? And just feel free to put your hands up if you can. But if I said to you, what score does your culture get? Who'd be able to answer that question, do you think? Many hands up. Let's have a look. That's a tough one, right? So, and that's what I was getting from this particular session that I was in. And I was sitting there thinking, well, what things change how people feel, right? And that's when, because I'd been asked about, I'd been the Ops Excellence group that we're doing. It's all free of charge. Everything we do is about making sure our industry gets better. It's all free. There'll be no pitching. No one's going to mention businesses, nothing like that as it comes in. This is all basically about making sure that we're trying to help the industry by creating the best possible stuff for the organizations. But yeah, the key behind today's session really is this, right? So let me just move on to this for a second. We're going to create a document. Now, we've already done a load of legwork in the background. So Helen and Livy and I, basically, we put 11 sections together, or the areas that sort of the touch points tend to happen. So things like hiring process. Hiring process is the first one. Before they come in, how do we show them the first look or the first chances to make sure the culture's as good as it can be? It's the first impression. Okay, so we created these 11 areas. Now, we didn't end up with 11, because once we were going through it, we were like, and we'll go through the journey we went on as we go throughout today. Then there was over 220 touch points or areas or things that we could really look into. Now, the hardest problem that we had was finding what to take out. Right now, there's no good coming out with an audit for 220 points because your job's already hard enough as it is. Right. So I'm a big fan of minimal viable product. What's the least we can do and still be amazing at what we do? Right. So we then broke it down. We sat down as a little team and we tried to get it, and we got it down to 42 points. Now, hopefully, what we're going to try and do today is we're going to try and build that document, right? And then it's about your thoughts on it, right? We're not saying that we're right. We're just saying that, these are the things that we think are the most important. But yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. And ideally, we can then have a look at how we can influence culture and effectively going forward. So basically, the brief way we're going to do it, we're going to start off with one of these sections. So the first section will be the hiring process. We're going to go through the section explaining the why. So we're going to pick out the big chunky bits and we're going to go, right, this is why it's important. Then we're going to open it out to the group and say, look, is there anything else we've missed? Now, because there was a 220 points thing to start off with, we know there's probably things that you're going to find more important. And the key is what do we think as a collective group, right? So please don't think that we know that we're right and we've got all the answers, because we don't. What I've noticed, I've been a cultural change expert for the last 10 to 15 years. And I quickly realized that I've never had an audit. So how was I actually changing culture? Now, some of the things that I go in and change in the business will be obviously talked about today. But it's amazing how once I started to build this with Helen and Libby, I took it back to my own business and I was like, Jesus Christ, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, right? I've got to get my own house in order, right? Before, how can I go onto this call sort of saying to everyone, right, you need to do this and this and this. And it really made me question what we do. So I think it'll do the same for yourselves. I think it will really open up. Now, before we go any further, it's time to introduce the professionals. Now, the reason why I call them professionals and not experts is I like to explain this before each session. So I think our industry's got a load of experts in it. right? And experts. So if I'm into golf, as a really good example, if I get a golf expert, the golf expert will be able to tell me who won in the Masters in 2018, who won at Glen Eagles, and they'll be able to tell me information. But if I want to improve my golf and I want to become good, it's no good going to the expert. I need to go to the professional. I need to go to the person who knows the ins and outs and actually what to do to make us better. So that is why I brought on these two lovely ladies who've been doing this for years. So we've got Helen Jagger and Libby Kirkley-Bryan, and we'll start off with Helen. Helen, would you like to do a little intro, mate?
Oh, can I? Hello, everyone. Hi, my name's Helen Jagger. I'm a wellbeing strategy consultant. I'm the founder of a health and wellness company called Thriveology, and I'm also a well accredited professional. So my background's a bit of a mix. I started off life as an executive search consultant in the technology and telecoms arena, and I also did a lot of internal recruitment for companies as well. So I spent a lot of time helping companies, and these were from startups right through to global organizations, to build and develop teams. I later moved into, I've had a lifelong love of health and fitness and well-being. And I moved later into fitness and wellbeing advising, and more recently into wellbeing strategy as well. So the work I do with Thriveology has stemmed from, I guess it's an innate belief that I have, that everybody should have access to health and wellbeing. And that obviously includes creating great cultures. On the consultancy side, I help organisations translate, to give you an understanding, Thriveology is a digital wellbeing platform with wraparound programming as well. On the consultancy side, I help organisations translate wellbeing from something, I guess it's sort of almost like abstract, into something more tangible and operational. So that might be everyday habits, systems, behaviours, and the things that shape how people feel at work. So the way I look at it is culture and well-being are inseparable, really. You can't have one without the other. You can build, obviously, the best well-being offer in the world, but if the culture doesn't support it, then it's not going to stick. Conversely, when you do actually have a really good culture, and it's healthy and people feel heard and supported and clear on what the purpose is, well-being actually becomes a natural outcome of how the organisation operates. So I guess what I'm excited about today is the fact that we're going to be looking at what best practice looks like, and how the small everyday things, like the way that we manage, the way that we meet other people, communicate, those kinds of things, actually define the health of our culture. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Hal. And yeah, I think really key points. Obviously, I've been doing I do quite a bit of work with Helen, and what you'll see that comes throughout today is that she really cares, right? And we've had this conversation many a time, Helen, we haven't, about well-being, and I think being is the most important part of that word. It's the human, it's the person, and it's just about people. And you know, culture is all about people. So you're right; those two things are massively integrated. I think they're the same thing. Right, if you've got good well-being and you've got good culture, you can't really have one without the other. So yeah, key. Okay, over to you, Lib.
Thanks, Craig. Morning, everybody. I'm Libby. So I have my own business called Disruptive Panda, and I'm an executive coach, a systemic team coach, and a strategist. So I'm all about supporting organisations, individuals and teams to develop their strategy and then turn that into actionable steps. So my background, settling, it's a bit of a long story, is I started off my career in hospitality. So I was a manager in bars and restaurants. So I worked for Mitchells and Butlers for a few years, ran a very big restaurant in Windsor, Browns in Windsor. So that was all about putting the customer at the heart of the delivery and a commercial focus. And then I'm from Harrogate in North Yorkshire. I wanted to move back up north, and ended up working as an agency gig in local authority in their waste services. And then it was years ago when they were about to start rolling out recycling services, and they asked me to stay. And so 17 years later, I basically worked within the local authority, and my role was change and transformation. So it was, at the beginning, it was customer sort of change and transformation, so rolling out new services. And then latterly, it was all about organisational change and transformation, so commercialising services, driving efficiencies. And I worked in lots of different services across the council. Was working corporately within the corporate team when the council decided to set up a leisure trading arm. And I was working alongside, you might know him, Mark Tweedy. He was the MD of Brimham's Active, and he asked me to go and work for him. So I ended up kind of accidentally within the leisure sector, and I fell in love with it, and I was head of performance and improvement for Brimham's Active. But the way I've always worked with driving change is putting people at the heart of it. So I really believe that if you want to really deliver excellence for your customers, you have to have a culture that supports that, and that means psychological safety. People are able to come forward with ideas without fear of kind of, negative consequences of that, and everyone's enabled to kind of drive the business in the right direction. I also believe that the people that are doing the job have the best ideas. So that's why I became a coach in 2016, because I realised I was working with teams, asking them to change their services, and I needed to be able to work with them, and I needed a language to do that. So that's why I trained as a coach. So now I've kind of smushed my coaching with my strategy stuff, and that's what I do. I'm here to help people kind of deliver their strategic ambitions by putting the customers and their people at the heart of that, because I think that's where the best ideas come from. So I'm mega passionate about inclusive, human-centered culture.
Lovely. There we go. That's the lid meister. Right. So Right, so this is what we've created in the background. Now, this is only a starter. We're not saying now everyone, anything that gets produced today, you're all going to get a copy of it, right? So you don't need to do screen grabs and all that type of stuff. Everything you see, you're going to get a copy of. Now, the way that we've done this is, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through, you can see who's going to present which different bit. So the very first process we're going to talk about is the hiring process. The audit item we're going to talk through. There's a little thing here so you can go back and do scores on yourself if you want to. Obviously, we're then going to explain the why, then you're going to get a copy of that. And what's really important for any audit is this bit here. Now, we're not going to go through every single measure, right? Because look, 42 things and going through times that by 5, we haven't got time to go through that. But the key behind it, this is a really important section. So the example here is, look, if it's all interviews are trained on the hiring process. Now, sounds like it's a really easy one and everyone should be, but I've seen people do interviews who've never been through any sort of formal stuff. So then it starts to break it down on this scale of 1 to 5. So it's a rubric scale, and it basically says, it tries to break down what you'd need to get a 1, what you'd need to get a 2, what you'd need to get a 3. So when you take this back, it becomes a little bit easier to give yourselves a score. Has anyone ever done any of them audits where it's a bit like trumping in the wind, right? Where it's a bit like, I'll give that a 4, but you don't really know why it's a 4, okay? So the reality behind it is for every single one of these points that we're going to go through, you can see here that there's a little bit of a why for you to take back into the business, but we're obviously going to talk you through that. And then we're also going to, there's the measurements at the end, which is really important. Now, once we've covered these first 3 of the hiring process, we're then basically going to say to you lot, look, is there anything else we need to add in at this section, right? So at this section, at the hiring stage, what have we missed? Okay, and like I said, for each one of these sections, we probably had 10 to 15 things, and we've had to we've merged a couple into each other again, etc., to try and get it down to these numbers. So we're going to start off with you, Hel, and we're going to start off about all interviewers are trained in the hiring process. Now, look, this isn't about teaching people to suck eggs, and we're not going to be talking through, we're not going to be talking about, it's all about behaviours and it's all about all this type. This isn't that session. This is about trying to make this as real as possible. And the reality behind it is it's key. So Hel, over to you, mate.
Right, so if we get started, the first one is obviously the hiring process. So I guess the first thing to really address is why it actually matters. If you see me looking over here, it's because I've got notes, because my memory is really not that good. So I have to remind myself what I was going to say. There's a lot of points here to get through. So if you think about hiring is like, you almost look at it like the front door of a company's culture. So it isn't just filling a vacancy. You're not just going through the motions of doing that. It's actually broadcasting your values to the world. And as much as we don't really want to focus too much on values here, and we said that we weren't going to focus on values is really what's made up through your culture. So every interaction that you think about within this process, before someone starts work, tells them how they're going to be treated thereafter. So it sets the tone for their employment. It's going to shape things like your reputation, inclusivity, employee well-being. This is before anyone even joins the organisation. So just to be to really express why that's important, people form emotional conclusions about the organisation based on how they're actually treated throughout the recruitment process. So if you think about it, what can bad hiring processes do? It can erode trust, diversity and morale even before the person's walked through the door. Behavioural science actually shows that unpredictability and poor communication during the hiring process elevates anxiety, not something you really want in the process more than you would have normally, diminishes perceived fairness as well. And both of these actually drive early disengagement. So from a performance perspective, it's actually not a good idea, because you're going to multiply downstream costs. So things like turnover, retraining, lost morale, that kind of thing. On the flip side of that, a more positive side, a transparent and structured hiring process actually creates a sense of well-being from day one. So it's all really positive. So the first point on here, the first item, is all interviewers are trained on the hiring process. So interviewers who wing it often project personal bias. So you're going to get their opinions are going to come across. There's going to be inconsistencies in the process at all, and they're not going to follow vital protocols that help identify the correct fit for the role and the company as deemed by the company and the collective management team. That's obviously going to damage that feeling of inclusivity as well, and it's going to affect hiring the right people that actually complement the team. So training in a structured way can actually articulate the company's culture and needs, and it recognises any bias and manages expectations along the way as well. So it builds fairness, and fairness ultimately builds that psychological safety that Libby was just talking about as well.
Sorry, Hel, sorry, I thought you finished that, mate. Go on.
No, I was just going to go on to the next piece. Did you want to comment on that?
So, I think what I wanted to ask you, because like I've had this before, Hel, where as a troubleshooter in Fitness First, they used to send me in, right, and I'd turn up and they'd need staff, and instantly my job was to train people, but they'd never train me to train people. Right, yeah. So I just want a sort of a show of hands. Has anyone here ever had to train some? First and foremost, does your organisation have a structured guide on exactly how to do interviews? And I mean, you're talking to train some, how to run assessment days, how to, the questions to ask, open question techniques, probing techniques, all that type of stuff. Who has that? Does anyone have that stuff? So a couple of nods. So Christopher, yeah, you've got it. A couple have got it in there. Okay, but it's weird, isn't it, that we sort of, Matt, brilliant. We have this process. Well, what does that training look like, right? And we're not going to do this for any other section on here, but here's an example of a training guide that you might use. Now, look, this seems like a little bit hefty, right? I'm not really stopping to let you see it, but what I'm trying to say is that this is all about the process, and this is the type of thing that you should have in the background. Now, this document here is 67 pages, right? Building recognition, making sure you understand buddy periods and how to train buddies and how to train people to look after them when they come in. But all of this to me is part of the process. So as we go through this today, try and think is what if what you've got, is it really fit for purpose? That actual training, how long does it take to train someone to be good at an interview, and what do they need to pass? You won't let someone sit on a poolside unless they passed a certain qualification to a certain level. You won't let someone do a defib on someone unless they can do certain things. What's the criteria in that interview process that you have to? Have I got to be at 80% of that course? Have I got to be 90% of that course? What are the pass rates? So I'm not going to do this for anything else, because there's every single one of these things has a document in the background, right? But I really want us to think about, the stuff that we've got. Is it okay, or is it a tick box, right? So sorry, Hel, over to you again.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And what Craig is saying is absolutely bang on. And it takes me on to the next point about the structured interview framework that's consistently used. Now, we're not talking about removing people's personalities here and not having any personalization in the interview process. This is not about that, but it is about enabling a framework or a structure that you can adhere to that will basically prevent people from just hiring someone that's just like me. So you've seen the sort of, please don't take this the wrong way, but like the boys club kind of scenarios, or the girls club, it could be, on the flip side, and it's all everybody's exactly the same. So it's that kind of setup. So having a structured process means that you can, you then don't miss vital signs. So there might be things like you might miss gaps in someone's skill set. If you're just literally hiring someone that you think is a bit like you might find that you've got a commonality, and you end up talking about that the whole way through the interview process. And actually, you didn't realise that they've got absolutely no experience in a certain area, but they put it down on their CV, that kind of thing. So it sort of highlights red alerts and red flags within the recruitment process. That means that actually, as nice as that person is, they might be ill-fitting for the actual team. So this process, by having a structured interview framework, what you are doing is you're using standardized questions, competency scoring potentially, and also reflective notes. And if you're interviewing a number of people reflectively, if you've interviewed 5 people, can you actually remember what everybody said? I don't know. By having the notes, then you can go back and compare. That creates an objectivity, and that then builds trust in the leadership as well, that they're not just going to go and get that person that's just like them and everybody's exactly the same. And it builds confidence in the actual process as well, so that everybody's following the same blueprint. So if that person's sick for a day, we know that someone else can fill in, and they're going to follow the same framework. I'll hand over to Libby.
Before we do that, Hel, I think I've always used DISC profiling, right? And you said something then really, really important. And what that was is we tend to hire people like us, right? Now, if you do that, you end up with yin and yin, right? So you end up with a load of people who can all do the same skills. So having this sort of, just because they're like you often means that's the person who you shouldn't hire, right? Because you've already got those skill sets in the organization. So yeah, really, really key. Sorry, Liv, over to you, mate.
Thanks. Just to add to that, my experience is the pressure on the sector at the moment is there is a trying to get, you've got to have your ratios at poolside, so lifeguards. So my experience is that actually with the hiring process, the protocols in place might not be as relevant if you've got pressure to keep your doors open. So then I've got experience where we'd get people in and they probably weren't a good fit, but they were there to help us basically keep the doors open. So I think that comes into play as well. So that is even more reason to have these kind of hiring processes really bottomed out. And just about offer of acceptance rates being tracked and analysed. Another kind of my experience is that the hiring process tails off after you've got somebody in post, and you don't kind of do that reflective piece or have that tracking and monitoring of where people are not wanting to come and work for us. And that tells us a lot. I mean, the details in the thing, but if it's a competitive market at the moment, and if you're in an area where you've got a lot of competitors, and you're not the employer of choice, you need to be able to understand why. So it's really important to then have that data afterwards and have some processes around analysing it, because that helps you understand the changes that you need to make yourselves more attractive. So that's probably my only kind of comment on that. I don't know if Helen or Craig, you've got anything you want to add?
Well, do you know what, the offer accepted rate is, I think there's a load of things that take this into account, is how long you go back to people and how quick you go back to them. It's, you know, knowing the reasons. How many people have been for the job and then you don't get any feedback apart from you didn't get the job, right? And all this to me is all part of this process, and how you feed back in the, you know, the way that things get accepted or knocked back. I think it's really important. You know, I know, Helen, we'd had a chat the other week. You'd been for an interview, something like 500 people, you got down to the last two, and then he went, oh no, the other person's got it because they've got more experience. Well, what experience were you missing? How do you, so to me, all this comes into this offer. It's how it's accepted or given away, right? By the way, you did amazing to get down to the last two. But the reality behind it is it's key. And where is this document? Is this across every department? Is this just the management roles? It's got to be in all of them. It's got to be consistent. So yeah, I think that's key. I do.
I think it also is about reputation as well. So if you're continuously getting offers declined, you need to be exploring what the reasons are. I mean, even if it means asking the candidates directly, you know, doing a little post-interview sort of interview type thing, just to ask them what the reasons were, if they're prepared to give it to them. Because I think if you're getting continuous declining of offers, then you really need to be looking at what your reputation looks like out in the market and what the process is that you're failing in, other people are actually winning in, really. So it's that it's really, it's a learning process as well. So it's the tool, the stuff that you learn afterwards is really vital.
I think a lot of the organisations which are on as well, Helen, is a lot of them will have bandings, right? Now, I was from the private sector where they don't have bandings. They sort of pay what they need to, and they get the people that they need, right? Versus a lot of these organisations will have a banding, and this is what we pay no matter what, right? So quite often that can be that can strangle the, you know. I watched someone doing an interview not that long ago, and there was a person there who was absolutely phenomenal, but they didn't have first aid, right? So they didn't, a bit like what Libby was saying before. So instead of taking the amazing person on and training them in first aid, which would have been much cheaper than taking on the person that wasn't skilled enough, but they did have this particular qualification, and then the person they took on wasn't right for the job, right from the offset. And but it all comes down to these bits and pieces. Now, obviously, you lot, right? Opening, you know, the hiring process. What else are we missing here? What else do we need to add into this list? What else can we measure at this stage to make sure that we? So, Sean just put a question in. And what are your thoughts on diversity hires rather than employing on merit? I appreciate this can sometimes be the same person. I'm a big fan. Again, I run my own business, and my thoughts on this is I'm going to hire the best person for the job. Right? It's my, you know, I'm quite lucky because it is my business. But if they're not the best person for the job, then they're not going to get the job for me. Now, I understand that certain organisations, you know, we have to have a balance of women, we have to have a balance of cultures, we have to have a balance. I don't know where you stop the balance. I really don't. Right? So the reality behind it is, to me personally, it has to be the right person for the job. Right, that's what's going to. If I pick someone just based on the fact that they were a certain, they fall into a certain category, not because they're skilled to do the job. I've got a mate who works for Airbus at the minute, and the ratios are going absolutely bizarre. They're hiring people. So 500 people came for the job, but in this particular role, they need to have a 50-50 on men and women. They've gone for basically they need to have equal outcomes. So equal opportunities, I totally agree with. Equal outcomes causes the problem that they have. 500 people went for the job, 450 of them were male, but they need to get 20 of each. Right now, it's caused major issues because the skill sets that were in the 50 ladies is not the same skill set that was in the 450 men. But they have to take an equal balance, and it's caused uproar in the organisation. So that's just my take on it. Libby and Helen, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say, I think you have to make sure, A, that you're looking in the right places in terms of diversity and inclusion. I think if you look, especially in the corporate sector, and you know, if you look in the investment field, for example, literally, if you're a woman in the investment field, and we're not talking about ethnic minorities here, which is even lower, and a woman trying to get an investment, say out of 100% of investment, 2%, less than 2% get that investment. So the issue that we have there is you will see boardrooms full. The workers might be really diverse, but the boardrooms are full of white middle-aged men, sadly. And I think there comes a point when you have to address that the right person might be the right person because they've had an advantage in life. So what are you doing in terms of training? What are you doing in terms of development within your organization? Is there an opportunity for people who come from less beneficial socioeconomic environments? Do you offer training? Is there an opportunity for them to grow and develop? You know, I'm not saying that for all of your recruitment process, but you have to address these things, because if we just all keep ignoring them, I get what you're saying, Craig, about the best person for the job, and in a small company that's even more vital than ever. But if you're part of a bigger organization, you do have to address these and look at what are the opportunities for people and how can you actually help them to climb the ladder, because it may be that people for either gender, ethnic minorities, socioeconomic backgrounds might not have the skills because they haven't had the opportunities that the other person has. That's the only thing I would say.
No, I agree, Helen. Look, from my perspective, I always interview on behaviours anyway, right? Because I don't think there's many skills that we can't teach people to do. Right, so I'm a big fan of, are they the right fit for the team? You know, have they got the right attitude? All them bits that are really hard to train someone in when they come in. So, but yeah, look, it's that's why this sort of session's here, isn't it? It's about throwing it out onto the table, and I think the reality behind it is that, you know, if you've done those first two processes right, so everyone's been trained properly in the hiring process, and we've got a proper structured framework, then that structured framework should tell you who to hire if you've done it properly, right? So yeah, I think, yeah, there's sort of two flavors there, which is good. Anything else that anyone thinks we should add to this section? No. I'll take silence as okay, and I will move on nicely to the next one. So now, obviously, they've come on board, we've taken them on, and now this is the onboarding process. So we'll start off with Libby, and this is a structured first day agenda that exists and is followed.
Thanks, Craig. Onboarding. Oh gosh, I just want to do a bit of an overview of it really before. Have people got? I just curious if people have a written down kind of onboarding process within their organisations. Yeah, Chris is nodding.
Because the case, isn't it, Liv, is that there'll be something there for all of these bits, right? But it's the quality of the bits and why and how and why they're used, isn't it? I think that's the important bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, mate.
Well, I'm not sure if people would, because I've worked in lots of different services across public sector, and some of them don't. That's why I think I was asking. But we've all been there, haven't we? We start first day on a job, you go in, and nobody was expecting you, so they sit you down and they wait for the person that's supposed to be meeting you, and it's a horrible experience, and we want to avoid that, don't we? So having a structured first day agenda and making sure it's followed is so vitally important to make people feel valued when they're joining our organisations. I don't need to tell anybody that, we all know that. I'm sure we've all got stories about this. So yeah, so just having that kind of, it's not just a structured first day agenda exists and follows, it's really vital, I think, that other people know that that person's starting, and that they'll be in the building and are ready to welcome them and have a chat with them and get them kind of immersed in the business on the first day without being overwhelmed, I think is so important. So that's why we added that one in, because it's something I think potentially we kind of do it as a bit of an afterthought. We go, oh, we've got somebody starting, we better pull something together, and then we maybe bounce that person around a few different people and kind of leave them to it, and it's not a great first impression. And again, like Helen said with recruitment, this is all reputational stuff. This is again another opportunity to kind of really show people what our culture is and what our values and behaviours are and how we treat each other. So that's why I think the structured first day agenda is so important to get those first impressions right. And also on there, we've got about the kind of the risk of not getting it right, because we all know about compliance, don't we, and health and safety, and especially in this sector, we can be very focused on that, which can be to the detriment, I think, sometimes of our culture, because we're not thinking about other things and kind of the experience that people are having when I like to talk about what happens in pool plant rooms, because I'm not sure, because I wasn't operational, but I know lots of things go wrong in pool plant rooms, and we don't want somebody to come in and sort of be abandoned because there's other stuff going on, and then they're not fully kind of immersed in what they need to be kind of immersed in with their role. So there is a liability risk around it as well. Craig,
I remember my first day for Fitness First. I was a site manager in Wrexham. I walked in and the receptionist said, "The area manager's ill, here's the keys." I didn't see him for 6 weeks. And that was my induction. I remember that loud and clear. And look, this happens, doesn't it? I think it's really, really. Imagine, has anyone ever been into an organisation and you haven't had all the passwords set up and all that type of stuff's not ready? It's really, really important. We're sort of surprised that we know these people are coming on. So yeah, the structured first day to me is absolutely critical. A tour, it's about settling them in. It's about giving them, do you all have mentors? Do you all have mentors and buddies in your organisation? So they've got a dedicated trainer. I go to a lot of organisations where they'll have a dedicated trainer for the things we hope people never use, like first aid and lifeguarding. We have a dedicated trainer. It can only be these people who've been on a course who can train them. But when someone comes into the organisation from an onboarding perspective, it's normally whoever's on shift, not particularly trainers and stuff like that. So I think that's a really, really key point. But that first day it's the first impression, right? Well, the second impression, but it's the first impression of their sort of employed life as it comes in. Okay, excellent. So the next bit is the initial goals. Expectations are clearly set. Well, look, I have a big thing that I say to all my staff, right, or any organisation that I work with, is that I would love my staff to exceed expectation, right? I would love them to exceed expectation. But if they don't know what the expectations are, how can you over exceed, or how can you even hit the expectation, and how can you be good? I say to, again, what does a good shift look like? What does a good end of shift look like? I went into an organisation the other week and I basically said to them, how do you be good? How do I be good if I work here? How do I know that this was a good shift at the end of it? Is it because no one's dead? Is that my marker, right? And I've done my little locker check at the end. I've pushed all the lockers. No one's in there lying on the floor, so I can go home, right? Is it no injuries, or is it the fact that 17 of our members have hit their goal today? Is it the fact that every single member of staff's interacted with at least 10 people, and we had 10 in, so 100 people have been spoken to? So to me, this bit is absolutely essential. And look, it's always about individual goals as well. We're going to move on to one-to-ones, and all that stuff's going to come a little bit further on. But this is really, really important. You don't want to be doing this on day one. Normally what I see as inductions is day 1 and 2, we sit them down and we give them 4,700 policies to read. We make them sign them so they can't sue us. And then we start letting them do a little bit of shadowing afterwards, right? But to me, after the first week, they're starting to settle. We then sit them down and go, right, this is how you be good in our organisation. And if you want to excel in our organisation, here's the steps and here's the path for you to go on. So I just think that the initial goals and expectations are massively, massively important in the organisation. Anyone got any thoughts on that before we move on? Not yet. That's good. Okay, that's smashing. Over to you, Lib. So this is formal check-ins. Feedback are scheduled and conducted.
Well, it's just so important, isn't it, to check in with people. And I think the world of work now is our diaries are so pressurized, and we'll talk about this, I think, when we talk about one-to-ones, but it's so easy to shift stuff around where we think, oh, I've got a more important meeting and whatever, and we all do it. And so formal check-ins and feedback, I think, and this is why it's in there, because we all agreed that these are the things that are so easy to kind of go, oh, it's not as important as something else. Yet this is so important if we want to make sure that people are happy, know what they're supposed to be doing, getting feedback from them as well. That's so important culturally, that we're having these conversations with people, because this is where we may be finding out that stuff's going on in our businesses that we didn't know about, because these people come in and they'll be spending time with lots of different people, and they might have questions and they're not sure about, and you can think, well, that's strange, because we've maybe got a knowledge gap within the organisation from what these people are telling us. And also it's that thing about making people feel valued. So I would say, firstly, you've got to make sure these are scheduled in with the person and do it on the first day, and then don't be tempted to kind of deprioritize this over something else, because these are the things that, well, the figures on there, isn't it? Touch points first 90 days reduced turnover by 25 to 30%. And these people, what I spoke about it earlier, it's hard to get people in our businesses. So when we've got them in, we want to keep them in. So this is such a simple way of doing that, but can also be something that we don't give that importance to. So I'd say that's why we've got it in there. It should be part of the process, and it should definitely be happening in my opinion. And we can find out so much if we have these kind of two-way conversations with people as well.
Yeah. What I think is really important here, Lib, is that these people are seeing our business through fresh eyes, right? You know, we've got people who've been there for 25 years. They've walked into that building 25,000 times, right? So the reality behind it is, this person coming in, what are they seeing? What stands out to them? If they could fix anything now and they were in my job, what would they do differently? You know, what feelings are they? This is a really, really important time, because they're going to be hypersensitive at this stage. And for us to not learn from them at this stage is absolutely mental, right? So yeah, but it always gets put off. You know, on that first day, we should be able to say, right, on this Friday, this is this meeting, this is this meeting, this is this meeting, this is in your diary, it's happening, right? So if you haven't got time for your staff, then who have you got time for? You know, if we're managers. Now, one of the things I also find about, in fact, I'll let Helen do this next bit on the manager before I do this next bit, but Helen, do you want to do the next bit on managers trained in the onboarding process?
Yeah, I just want to touch on sort of like the psychological and physiological effects of what can actually happen in a process like this. So human behavior is driven by the need for predictability and connection, essentially. So when you have like situations where people are left alone, like you were talking about, Craig, that essentially sort of equates to neglect, a feeling of neglect. Ambiguity breeds anxiety, so you end up in that sort of flight or fight situation, and where you're actually having physiological effects of that, which is like cortisol spikes, and that kind of thing obviously then affects your ability to behave and be productive in an environment. So when you have a structured onboarding process, what it does is that actually calms down your nervous system, and it replaces all of that uncertainty and that confusion that you might potentially have with feelings of confidence, of enthusiasm, curiosity, and again, that sense of belonging that you actually have. So it positions you in a place where you actually can produce your best work. So from that point of view, it's really important that we as individuals are actually relaying that kind of behaviour. It sets the tone for further down the line. If you're doing that as your onboarding process, then that's what that person will then do as well. On the manager training side, the manager experience essentially is what I was saying is, if you look at actually exactly the kind of I mean, it's probably a very extreme version that Craig's mentioned, but most sort of poor starts trace back to manager neglect ultimately, because they haven't organised things, they haven't set it up properly, and they haven't put the best practices in place. So actually, by training managers in the whole process of onboarding and doing it properly and setting up frameworks, it balances information with empathy as well, and it creates a clarity for the person, not only for, as Libby's mentioned, when you come in and nobody knows that you wasn't even expecting you, but it creates clarity for the person who's going through the experience, but it creates clarity and expectations set for the people within the team as well. And then that also builds this sort of leadership consistency as well. So you're ending up at reinforcing that everybody knows what their role is, everybody knows what's expected to them. And again, everybody's well-being is being assured, and knowing that it's everyone's responsibility within this process. So I think it's about that clarity, taking down ambiguity and ensuring that someone is going through the right process, which helps not only the individual going through it, but also the team as well.
Yeah, I think again, Hal, it's mad. We tend to do this type. If we ever do this stuff, we tend to do it as a one-off as well. So when the manager first come in, right, we're going to teach you how to do the onboarding process. Now, anyone that's ever worked in leisure and worked in pools or first aid is, again, we go back to these skills, the lifeguard and the first aid, and we constantly do them. You know, we do first aid every couple of years. We do every single month. We do lifeguard and stuff. And anyone who's ever taught that training will tell you, I went through this with you last month. How come you can't remember this stuff I'm going through with you again? Now, how are you meant to remember this for the rest of their life? I go into an organisation where they've been in there for like 15 years and they maybe got it covered on day 2, right? And it's like, oh yeah, we've done that, tick. So any sort of training, you know, and look, the higher up we go in the business, the less you get, right? The induction, you know, if you look at, you know, I know a load of the people on here because they're my customers, right? But what was your induction like? What was your onboarding like for your role? And onboarding for your role, right, is that if you've been promoted from within, well, you still need an onboarding for that role, right? We still need that role still needs onboarding. So you used to be a good fitness instructor or a good receptionist, and now you're the manager of that area. What does that onboarding look like? But just because you've always been here, it's like, oh yeah, Gary, you know, Gary, I can see your picture there, mate. But it's like, right, you're going to take on this new role. There you go. You know, juggle everything else you're doing and do this as well for us, right? So quite often when we hire people internally, or when we upgrade people internally, we forget that there should be an onboarding experience for that new role. And it's a big, you know, I always say to people, we give them a new badge, right? We give them this magic badge and now they become amazing managers, right? Because they used to be good at what they did, and now they've got this magic badge and they're going to understand time and task management. They're going to understand training. They're going to understand question techniques. They're going to understand conflict because we give them a magic badge because they used to be good at their old job. So I think sometimes the onboarding experience, we think that that's only for new people who we've never seen before. But I'm a big fan, there should be an onboarding experience for every single job role. And if you move up within the company, I think that's key. Any questions on the onboarding experience before we move on? There's got to be one or two on onboarding. It's massive. Who out of everyone that's on, right? Put your hand up if you reckon that the induction that you had for the job role that you're in now was perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so, and it's mad that, isn't it? It's like, and look, the higher up you get in that company, you know, I can see Ollie's there, Ollie Boyle's there, or Ross McGowan. If you go to this next step, what do you reckon the induction's like for there, right? Because we know it's not very good at the bottom because we keep losing everyone, right? We've got an industry where we've got a transient amount of staff and we lose loads of them, right? So we know it's not good at the bottom, but it's right the way throughout. Massively, massively important. Okay, so we've covered 2 bits. I think what we'll do, Hal, we'll do this next one, and then we'll have a little break after we've done this cross-functional collaboration. Okay, over to you, Hal.
Okay, so I love this one because I've built an entire company on the idea of collaborating with other people. So I'm all about collaborating. I do a lot of collaborating within not only Thriveology, but also in the work that I do in wellbeing strategy as well. The reason being is it takes a village, as they always say, and working together and actually having lots of people's skills together is really, really integral to success in an organization. What happens if you don't collaborate with other people is silos are formed, and silos essentially are really, they're like cultural toxins ultimately. What you end up with is a them versus us scenario. It creates huge amounts of duplication within an organization. You've probably got one department doing the same thing as another department, and neither of them actually know that they're doing that. And then ultimately you also get a process of potential burnout as well. And I don't want to use that word lightly in terms of it's just like a throwaway term, but people doing too much because they didn't realize that this department or this person already does that. So what you get through healthy collaboration or cross-functional collaboration is you get actually it becomes like a visual measure of psychological safety, because people only share information between one another if they actually trust one another. So what happens is when you have that trust and you have that open collaboration, it creates room for ideas and suggestions that might not otherwise come about in an organization. Collaboration can also determine how the customer feels as well. So do they feel cared for, or do they feel shuffled between teams that are completely disconnected and don't communicate with each other? We've had that. How many times have you been passed on by someone in an organization? It's really frustrating, and you're like, for God's sake, you lot just talk to each other, even like a phone call, and you have to repeat yourself again and repeat yourself again. It's really, really frustrating. So that's obviously just from a customer point of view, but collaboration also sort of enhances your overall well-being. And I know I love to come back to that word, but it's my thing. And essentially that's what having a good culture is all about. So if you have collaboration, what you actually do is disseminate cognitive overload as well. So not loads of people working on the same things in silos. It increases, when you work together, a sense of belonging as well. And it provides social support and community as well, because you're actually engaging with other people within your organization, which perhaps you wouldn't do otherwise. So when we look at the first point here of cross-functional project teams are regularly formed, again, it goes back to that thing of breaking the silos. It creates empathy amongst teams, and it also creates speed to get things done in a more efficient and effective way as well. If you create task-specific working groups as well, then everybody has clear, visible goals. They have visible results because you can see the outcomes as well, and it also builds shared ownership and dismantles that thing that I said earlier about us versus them mindsets, because everyone's working together for the same collective goal. Libby.
Sorry, before we jump on to Liv there, Hal, is that I think this cross-functional, this is part of the onboarding process, should be the shadowing. Right, it's that you go and have a feel for what actually, everyone always thinks that no one else works as hard as them, right? So our department's the only one that ever does anything. But if you do a proper shadowing at the beginning, then you get a feel for what these different organizations actually do and where they can help. So I think that's the start of this collaboration, where you start to know someone in another team straight away, because you sat with them for a day or half a day or whatever it may be. You understand that, I've seen this, they have this problem, they've dealt with it before. So that, to me, that's the start of it. But what you said, Hal, is absolutely massive. Right now, I've seen organizations that, so every site is an island. So they might have 5 sites, and every site is its own island, right? It runs its own way. It's got its own maverick who decides how things happen there. And then you have the teams within it, which are silos. But I've even seen silos between shifts, right? So even on a different shift, things are getting done differently. So I think this one is absolutely massive. And when you bring different departments in, I know when I used to work in the hotels, each department used to sort of, the cleaners would go and do the fitness would go and do the kitchen, because every time they went in, they had fresh eyes and fresh ideas. So you don't keep getting what you've always done. So yeah, absolutely massive, H. Yeah, massive. Libs, over to you. Interdepartmental communication channels are established and engaged.
Thanks, Craig. I also love this section, by the way, but it's taken me right back into my role at Brimham's and all those conversations where I felt like I was refereeing different teams, and you know, something would go wrong with the system, and then they wouldn't report it, and I'd be like, why don't you report it? And they'd be like, it's not my job to report it, this person should report it. So yeah, it's so vitally important to get this right for culture, and actually it's what I've done for my career, is kind of bring people together and break those silos down. So interdepartmental communication channels are established and engaged. This is a hard one to get right. So firstly, you've got to make sure that there are lots of different ways for people to kind of communicate the things they need to communicate, and you've got to get it right for those kind of communication channels. And I think that's a really hard one to do today, whether you're using Slack channels or WhatsApp, or there are loads of different things you can do, but it won't be right for everybody. So I always talk about multi-layered comms channels between, and you've kind of got to get the people who are using those comms channels involved in setting those up so that they work really well, because without that, then we're carrying on in the silos. Once you've got them set up, I think there's another challenge then about getting people to use them and engage with them. And I think that this is where we have to kind of put accountability onto all the members of our teams to engage in comms that are going out. So it's kind of, I have lots of conversations with people who say, how do I get comms out? And I'm like, well, I've worked in lots of different operational settings, not just leisure, but I've worked in waste and hospitality. And I think it's never going to be solved. I think you have to multi-layer your comms, but the big key point for this is you have to make people accountable for engaging with them. Otherwise, you'll put it in place and they won't. They'll just say, nobody told me. So I think those are the conversations where you have to start holding people accountable for, you're not checking the channels. So it's a two-way thing really around how they work, but they have to be in place. And I would suggest the best way to get it right is to include the people who are going to be using those channels in designing them, and then you will get more use of them, and people will have accountability for doing that as well, because they can't say they didn't know. And I'm just talking from my experience of the conversations I used to have. But yeah, it goes back to that kind of breaking down the silos.
Do you know what? There's a couple of communication tools that we give people, but we never train them how to use. So Outlook's a really good one. I've got a couple of things that wind me up, and one of them's called CC syndrome. Right now, CC syndrome is where everyone just covers their arse and sends it to everyone. So now I've got to read 400 emails instead of the 100 that I was meant to get. 100's already too many, but for some reason, so I used to teach our staff to, if you sent me an email and it was CC'd, it comes into my inbox with a yellow tag on it because it's not for me. So I'll read the ones which are for me first. So it's little things like that. These are the communication things, right? We've got this amazing Outlook communication tool, but we don't teach people how to use it. You know, we see people arranging meetings by email. Well, why isn't that a meeting request, right? Just silly little things like that, or using the channels effectively in Teams, whatever it may be. And you also hit on something there, Liv, which was WhatsApp. Now, any organisation that's using WhatsApp, it's so dangerous. It's absolutely so dangerous. Anyone that leaves, anyone that's disgruntled has a copy of every single thing that everyone's done. That's not the communication method that you should be using in any organisation. But yeah, really key points is that we give them this amazing Outlook tool, but then we don't teach them how to use it. We don't teach them how to create rules. We don't teach them inbox management. Honestly, God, I went to someone the other day and she must have had 200 emails, and I'm like, what are you doing next? Right? These are all parts of the communication and email. Has anyone ever suffered CC syndrome? Has anyone ever had that where you get copied in just for the sake of it?
I think everybody has that. Everybody I talk to has this email issue at the moment. Can I just pick up on that CC thing? It's actually a really good indicator of your culture, because if people are doing that,
and so BCC as well.
Yeah, because if people are doing that, to cover themselves, it's an indicator it's a massive indicator of culture, because it shows there's a lack of trust, because you're worried that somebody's going to turn around and say, well, I told them and they haven't done it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we could talk about email all day.
You could, right? Well, look, we get that many of them. Right, it's and the weirdest thing is you know, Dr. Albert Meribian did a study on communication. Right, 7% is words alone, but for some reason we think posters and emails are the best way to get our message out. Right, when we know sitting down and having a chat with someone or giving them a call gives us up to 45%. Getting in front of them and speaking to them means we can solve things so much quicker. But still to this day, we play this tennis game, right? And it's a reason why communication's poor. But anyway, that's my rant. I'm going to stop ranting now. Hel, over to you on teams understanding each other's priorities and challenges.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were talking about transparency and creating trust. This essentially reduces stress levels, because if people actually understand what's going on, how often do you get agitated by a situation because there's a lack of information? So I think that transparency is key. So when we talk about teams understanding each other's priorities and challenges, this really helps to remove that lack of transparency. Basically, if you look at it a different way, misunderstanding, if you don't really understand a situation, that can breed resentment ultimately, because you don't have empathy with the situation, you don't understand, you don't have a clear picture. So what it can be is you can have silos. You often get it between sales teams and operational teams. Like, sales teams are promising loads of stuff and operations go, what the hell have you done? Put us in a really difficult position. And it becomes a sort of a them and us situation of, they don't get what we do, that kind of scenario. So whereas actually when you collaborate with each other and you talk to each other, it basically creates a position of compassion for each other's situation, and you gain understanding, and that makes a much better setup. So I suggest with things like proactive things that you could do is like you mentioned it earlier, Craig, like a shadowing, like a day in the life of. So you literally go and do session swaps and department swaps in other departments. So you understand, you see what the other teams are going through. You see a little bit of that, you actually do it. And so it creates that compassion and empathy for their situation, understanding. And it also, what it helps to do is build unification between the teams as well, and appreciation for cross teamwork as well. So it's sort of replacing blame with understanding.
Yep, cool in the gang. Lib, over to you on conflict between teams is addressed quickly. Wow.
That's a big one, isn't it? I think the question just is conflict addressed between teams. Do you have a way of doing that and functions to do that? For all the reasons we've been talking about communication and siloed working and moving away from blame culture, you have to be able to address conflict if you want to move into a culture of collaboration and co-collaboration as well. So that's interesting what you said, Helen. I've been working with a team where the sales people are absolutely on fire and the ops people cannot keep up with them, and it's only a small organization and it's causing real tensions. And the work I've been doing with them is about those, it's called stakeholder relationships in team coaching. So what are those stakeholder relationships like, and the stakeholders within organizations, and this is what this is talking about. How do you manage out conflicts between your different stakeholders, and do you have a process for that? Because without it, it will just fester and you'll never be able to shift away from that blame culture to the co-collaboration. And it's hard because these are hard skills to master, and people don't like to have these difficult conversations. So having a process in place for that and people trained to kind of facilitate those conversations, I think is really, really vital if you want to ensure you've got that co-collaboration within your organization.
I think the thing with conflict is people constantly, to me, there's productive conflict, right? It's, there's negative and there's productive, right? Now, the problem is that we put it all under the conflict negative barrier in most organizations. And the reality behind it is what does that training look like? It's, I did a training day once on conflict, and there's 18 causes of conflict, whether it's sarcasm, whether it's belittling, whether it's, there's 18, there's loads of them. And we don't teach people these things, right? We just assume that they're going to be able to pick it up and run with it. And the reality is it's really hard, right? So understanding the individual and what's caused it in the first place. And, one of the biggest conflicts I see in organizations is when you get two people in a team, one of them's not very good and one of them's really good. The one who's really good keeps getting all the work because we know the other one won't do it. Right. And it's like, well, how's that right? Do you know what I mean? Or I go into an organization and someone's underperforming. I think we come up to this later on. Someone's underperforming. So we give them a development plan. And I'm like, so have I got to underperform to get a development plan? Do you know what I mean? But to me, these are all conflict issues that arise. But I think this is massive. I think this is one of the biggest problems, is the head in sand that kicks in at this stage. It's got to be nipped in the bud instantly, and it's got to be dealt with sort of there and then. But we don't give people the skills to do it. So sorry about ranting again. I can't help it. The next one is me. Best practice. Look, I've got another question for you. In the last month, how many best practices have you shared from a different department to another one? Put your hand up if you've done at least one. One hand, I can say. Oh, two hands, three hands. We've got three hands. Not bad. Okay. It's a funny question to be asked, that, isn't it? Right. And if we are sharing best practice, if we're not, that means no one's doing anything that's that stands out really, or something that we can share. But you're either perfect, and that's the reason why we can't find anything better than what we're doing, which I think there's probably a small chance that that's going to happen. But to me, this is massive. This is about managers. We're definitely going to come on to this later on, but this is about knowing things. Yes, an accident happens and we fix it and we learn from it and we change it, right? So that's great. I go into a lot of organizations where they measure accidents before they measure culture. So they can tell me exactly how many accidents they've had, but they can't tell me how the business is running. Right. And I always ask them, or they can't tell me how many of their members hit their goal, but they can tell me that they had 14 accidents last month. And I'm thinking, who joined for an accident? Why are we so good at that bit? Do you know what I mean? I know it's all reactive and that type of stuff, but best practice to me is about, you've got to get out there and you've got to be speaking to your team. You've got to, this will come out of all your one-to-ones, when that new person comes in and we have a chat and we go, oh, that is a great idea. Or you were in this department and you've seen that. Why don't they do it in this one? Amazing. Let's go and get it. Let's bring it back. So, my whole life has been built around best practice. It's all I've ever done. And obviously this whole excellence group of what I'm trying to produce is by trying to get everyone together to say, look, how do we become better at this? How do we become better at what we do? So look, I'm just a big fan that we've got to share things. And if you've got a department, like you just said, then the sales are flying and these aren't. Well, is it because when sales aren't in, they have to do sales, but they don't get commission? We've got to really break it down and look at why the problems are occurring, right? But yeah, you've got to share stuff. And if you're not sharing something at least once a month, you've got to question why, right? And if you've got no one in your team that's doing anything above and beyond, then again, that's maybe a measure that we need to look into. So yeah, I just think it's massive. There should be something every single month that we do to improve stuff. Right. Should we have a little 5-minute break? Yeah. So we'll have a little 5-minute break. We're going to stay on. If anyone wants to ask us any questions, anything like that, then absolutely fine, please do so. And yeah, just you want to put your screens on, you want to go to the toilet, you want to have a drink, do whatever you like, and we will start again at 1:45, if that's okay. So just quick wheeze. See you in a minute.
Quick wheeze.
Quick wheeze.
I should have mentioned Lencioni when we were talking about that and the five dysfunctions of a team, because being able to have conflict is the second above trust.
Well, it's because you don't have it that trust gets lost.
I know you said that we would stay on, but I'm going to go and have one of those
You go and have one of them quick wheezes, no probs.
I might as well.
I'm all right, I've got a bucket here, I'll just carry on.
It's really interesting. Really interesting.
Do you know what, mate? There's just the key behind it is that I think if you take this back and question yourselves, I think it's how you fix stuff. But you've got to, for any journey, there's only two things you need in any journey. And that is basically to know where you are now and where you're heading. Solid moves, Craig. I agree with much of what you said. The challenge is implementing consistency across multiple centres with multiple different managers, different personality, stage of life, motivation, etc. Yeah, do you know what, mate? I totally agree. And do you know what, Alex, is that my very first job was in McDonald's. Right now, they pay some of the worst pages in the world. Right, they only really pay minimum wage. Because they've got proper standards, and because they actually build the management of the process before they build the process, and it's about consistency. Right, so I think the key behind this is it's about having a single point of truth, Alex, of this is the way that we do it here. This is our way. Now, what happens in a lot of organizations when those standards or those processes aren't solid enough in the beginning, somebody creates their own version of them. Now, I'm a big fan of, I've used disc profiling all my life. Right, I don't know why people don't get taught this. I don't know why kids don't get taught it in school, because one of the hardest things to understand is people. Right, now people are weird, right, but they're predictably weird. So, you know, the way I handle a D, you know, when I do a one-to-one with a D, will be a hell of a lot shorter than the one I do with someone who's dominant. Will be a hell of a lot shorter than the one I do with someone who's conscientious and who needs planning and structure and that type of thing. But they still got to have it, and they still got to have the same things that come out of it. The way you did it's funny, Alex. I've been listening to. Did you ever watch like the Diaries of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett? He's got one on today with Jurgen Klopp. And Jurgen Klopp is saying this same thing. His point is you can't, there's certain things that you have to treat everyone the same with, timekeeping and standards, that type of stuff. He said, but how you speak to them and how you deal with them, you know, what he said when he was dealing with Trent when he was 16 versus Milner who was 30, you can't treat them the same. You know, I can't treat Diaz, who's from the streets of Colombia, who's been kicking around the ball with no shoes on, exactly the same as Jordan Henderson, who was, you know, brought up so totally different in Sunderland, right? So the reality behind this is that we need the same structures, but the way we deal with those people would be different. You know, Dawn and we do this in our business. We've all got this profiling, right? And the reality behind it is that it's about how do I unlock that person, but we've got to be consistent. You know, they still need a one-to-one, even though it might be slightly different. I still need to do certain checks, even though it might be, you know, we'll come on to the checks a little bit later on, because this is something that most organizations miss. But no, I agree with you, mate. I totally agree. But what was amazing, Alex, is that McDonald's, if I went to Russia, I reckon the Big Mac would have 2 pickles on it, right? And the filet of fish will have half a slice of cheese. Right, and these are, not only do they get their consistency across multiple nations, multiple sites, but they don't even own them, mate. The franchises. So once you know, a lot of this comes down to the processes, and this is if Gordon Ramsay went to a McDonald's, they would teach him how to make a Big Mac. In leisure, we go, oh, if you got an NVQ level 2, oh, we'll leave you to it then. Right, so that, to me, that's one of the biggest problems that we have here. But and that central point of truth is, you know, you show me the document that shows me exactly how I do that thing there. When it says clean a toilet, you show me the document that says that I lift the lid up, I lift this bit up, I take this bit off, I get the yellow grout off the side, I don't leave the toilet brush with 600 people's poo on it. Do you know what I mean? I keep going to places where they keep leaving toilet brushes out, and I'm like, who's that for? But what I'm saying is that what does that actually look like, Alex? Do you know what I mean? I think it's really important. Brendan, absolutely no problem at all, sir. The session's getting videoed, so if you want to pick it up later, you can. And I'll be doing a little follow-up. And of course, because you come on the session, you're going to get a copy of everything that we produced up to now as well, mate. So no problem at all. But yeah, Alex, keep the questions coming, mate. I love that.
Just FYI, I've worked at McDonald's as well, and it was incredibly robotic in terms of this is how you do it, X, Y, and Z, and there is absolutely no deviation from that. So yeah, I've experienced that. I know what you mean.
Well, I couldn't believe it when I left McDonald's and went into leisure. I couldn't believe that he didn't train me. I was like, what? I just found it really strange. I was like, I didn't know what the way was. you know, if I want to be in the training squad in McDonald's, I've got to pass an exam and get 85%. Here, I basically just need a pulse, and they'll put someone with me if I'm on shift. Do you know what I mean? And it's like it's amazing how. Do you know what I mean? It's like in McDonald's, you can't train someone unless you know your stuff. Here, you can train someone if you're on a Monday, and so's that person.
Can I add something about just my experience of when I started working with teams in leisure? I was really surprised by well, there's two things that I think are distinctly different to the rest of my kind of public sector experience with teams. Was firstly, everyone's really competitive, which makes it, which the competitiveness comes out in kind of really subtle ways sometimes as well. I think that competitiveness, because you've entered a field where, you know, if you've done sport or you've done sports science or whatever, it seems to, I've noticed that it comes out in really subtle ways. But also my role was to basically strip out bureaucracy from an organisation and put in real simple process to make it to enable people to be innovative and creative, but also so that we had a standard so we could guarantee things coming out. But what I got a lot of pushback on was any process was still thought of as bureaucratic. So I spent a lot of time having conversations with people saying, no, it's a process to ensure an outcome. It's not bureaucratic. And I don't know, there's this wonderful, and it's not a criticism, because I absolutely love the sector because I think the people are great, but I would find myself saying, a process just ensures an outcome. A recruitment process ensures that we're going to have an outcome that works for us and the person we're recruiting. And people go, oh, I don't want to do that. I want the freedom to, So it was I think that is sort of a layer on of where some of the issues maybe come from with trying to standardise.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I'm quite aware of is we're probably going to have to try and speed up a little tiny bit. So I'll stop interjecting because I'm a pain in the arse. But we'll have to just try and we're on about point 15 of 42. We've got about an hour and a half or so left. So yeah, we'll have to try and sort of rocket through this, not rocket through it, but try and give the bits and pieces. So Helen, we're over to you now. And on this bit, we are now talking about the manager effectiveness. Oh,
yeah, quite a big one, this one. So if you think about it, managers are often like the emotional regulators of the workplace. So the tone that they set through the work that they do, the consistency of their procedures and effectiveness, essentially, at the present, how all of their actions essentially basically correlate to how safe and supported people feel within the workplace. And I think what you find, and often this is the case in leisure environments specifically as well, you know, when managers are reactive because they have to be, if they're absent because they disappear off into the plant room, as Libby was talking about, or they're overloaded or something like that, then when we look at the sort of cultural standards, they tend to erode and wear away quite quickly. So there's also some research that essentially links line managers to quality of engagement, people's well-being, and the turnover of people within an organisation as well. You know, the old adage of people don't leave jobs or companies, they leave people. So that tends to apply. So where operations are quite high pressure, where they're often shift based as well, effective management isn't about just taking control, like you were talking about, Libby, about setting precedents and being able to set procedures that people can follow and adhere to for outcomes. Managers' effectiveness is around availability to the people that work for them, the trust that they get, and also the consistent follow through of actions that they say that they're actually going to do. So ideally, a manager will absorb chaos, not actually amplify it. So obviously one of the key things we've talked about earlier, we mentioned earlier, was the idea of regular one-to-ones. So why are these actually important? So without regular one-to-ones, a manager can actually lose touch with what's going on with their teams. So you can have issues that go unresolved, you can have massive morale dips within a team, and essentially then their performance is going to be negatively affected as well. So when we look at behavioural studies that show regular structured one-to-ones, these are actually deemed as the most powerful tool for maintaining engagement and reducing attrition ultimately. What do we need to do in that sense? So we need to set one-to-ones and have them as a fixed event in our calendars, not something that's just a nice to have at some point during your week or your month or whatever. Hello. We should. I don't know whether someone's is not on mute, but I don't know whether you want to put yourself on mute. Sorry, I'm not sure whether you're having a chat with me or whether or not. You're having your own conversation, but anyway. So what do we do in terms of one-to-ones? We should be really holding them, worst case scenario, monthly as a minimum, and also creating a structured agenda within those that will help to address things like performance, development, well-being, and also any barriers to doing the work that they need to be doing as well. I'm not asking for someone to become robotic, because obviously, like you were saying, Alex, I think, is it Alex? I think when you were talking about McDonald's, you said it was really robotic and that kind of stuff, and that there was no sort of flexibility around that. Clearly, you have to be empathetic, you have to lead in a way in which is suitable for the situation, but having that sort of structured framework for a one-to-one, again, helps. Even however familiar you are with a person, however well you know them, sometimes you can just miss things. And it's not through any fault of deliberately not asking someone, you know, showing them that you care, but it just can mean that you're not asking in the right way, which doesn't then gain the right answer, as it were. So when we look at, you know, the cultural impact of this, we have to make sure that listening, care are operational priorities, and then not sort of just like time filler little 5 minutes with someone. And this and then ultimately builds trust. It strengthens accountability that Libby was talking about. And it also models from the top healthy communication habits as well. So am I next as well?
No, I'm next, mate.
All right.
So I agree. When we did the scoring for this, this was the highest score out of every single thing, is the importance of one-to-ones, and it's often the thing that often goes missing. Right now, one of the things I think is really important, and I'll bring this up in the actions bit that I'm talking about, is this is for the individual, it's not for the organization, right? So the organization will benefit from it because the individual becomes better at what they do. So one of the things I used to get frustrated with is that every July, when HR have said you've got to have a one-to-one, right, or otherwise known as an annual performance review or whatever it may be, it gets done, but it gets done because the organisation needed to be done, not because we were doing it for the individual. Now, to me, these monthly one-to-ones minimum that you're having are about driving the person towards whatever goals they've got. Now, I had a girl once who came to work for me. She was on 14 grand. She was amazing. She came in, she started off on reception. I got her the job as the head of receptionist. And I remember sitting down doing a one-to-one. And it was like, look, what do you want to do? Don't worry about this business. Where do you want to go? She'd just done a degree in marketing. And I was like, excellent. Right, I tell you what, you want to get into marketing, we do loads of it, so why don't we work together on this? And I'd set it an objective, and the objective or the actions would be, I want you to go and take a photograph of 5 shops, and I want you to do this every single week. While you're there, ask them if they want to join, and we'll do a partnership or whatever. But the reality is, go and take pictures of 5 shops. She went and did this. She sat down with me and she went, oh, they change all their promotions each week. And I'm like, do we? And she's like, no. It's okay, so maybe we've learned something. The next one was, I want you to log how many posters we have around our building, right? So she logged all the posters we had around our building. She took the fire plan and she logged where they were, and we had 200. And I went, God, no wonder no one listens, right? Who's reading 200 posters when they walk around? So we looked at the paths of where people walked on it, but all these objectives were for her, right? So she then went, look, I can see when people walk the pool, these are the things that we should have on this route. When they walk to the gym, this is what they should have here. You know, she even in the men's changing room, she put wee charts up. If you wheeze this colour, you need a Lucozade, right? It was amazing. We started selling loads of it, right? But it was really, really silly things like that. All the actions and things that I was setting there, 2 years down the line, we hadn't failed to hit our ad spend target. Our average spend per swipe was about 78p. Right now, your organisations will be a hell of a lot lower than that because you don't concentrate on it, right? But the reality behind it is I lost this girl, but she did amazing work for 2 years. She was absolutely phenomenal. And I ended up with this blueprint of how to turn around any ad spend in any organisation. But every objective I set her was for her. The business just benefited by a side fault. Now, the key behind any actions that you set is that people should be doing them. Has anyone ever been to a meeting, and we're going to come on to meetings later, but has anyone ever been to a meeting and there's loads of actions but no one does them? Has that ever happened to anyone? Right? Well, this is part of your culture. If it's okay not to turn up on time, if it's okay not to do things, that's your culture, right? So there's certain rules in any organisation I've been which are non-negotiable, but it's all about the people. So for this one, the actions and followed up, they should be personal actions to make this person better at what they want to do. And if you do it for the individual, I go into organisations and you say, I've been here for 27 years. Why should I do anything for them? They don't do anything for me, right? Get them to do it for themselves. The business will benefit and they'll become really, really good. And you might not keep them for that long, but it's better than keeping someone for 27 years who's no good, right? It really is. So let's, you know, to me, this is huge. Anyway, over to you, Lib.
Thanks, Craig. I'm going to wrap mine sort of together with the coaching skills, because the coaching skills kind of picks up the difficult conversations, and I've got a book recommendation for you in a second. So managers receive comprehensive coaching skills. So what happens in environments where we don't train our leaders to be leaders is they will emulate the style of the managers that they've learned from their leaders. So we'll get style emulation going on. Is very, very often the case. Not always, but very often they'll manage how they were managed. And that's not always great for culture in an organisation. And also when people move on into a new role, they will take that management style with them. So they may not be able to flex a leadership style that suits the situation they're in. Coaching is not just about being able to ask great questions. Coaching skills are the ability to build rapport with people, so understand other people and build a connection with them. So it's relationships. It's growing your self-awareness, so you have an understanding of self, so you become aware of your biases, your blind spots, information about you that might have been hidden to you. So it's reflective practice. And also coaching skills will pick up the sort of models and tools that enable you to be able to handle difficult conversations. So it's not just about, people often think, oh, coaching is just about going and somebody's going to ask me some great questions. That's not what coaching is about at all. So if we want to create emotionally intelligent leaders who are able to deliver really great performance and drive organizations in lots of different directions and flex their style, we need to understand how to do that. And coaching is a great tool for our managers to have, because it turns them into leaders. So, and that means that they will automatically be building rapport with the team members, understanding where other people are coming from, able to be curious and listen, and it moves us away from sort of those instincts to command and control, which often, if you're kind of from a public sector background, is the sort of style of leadership that would have been modelled. So that's why that's really important. Now, Helen alluded to the open limbic loop earlier when she said that managers set the emotional tone of an organisation. There's neuroscience behind that. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will have seen this. I bang on about this book constantly. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's called The New Leaders, Transforming the Art of Leadership into the Science of Results, by an author called Daniel Goleman. He is the kind of expert of emotional intelligence, and he wrote it with two other authors. But this is, if you want to understand why coaching skills are so important in an organisation. Pick this book up and read it, and it also has leadership styles, and it'll tell you how to flex. It gives you some tips. So that's what I'm going to say about why I think coaching's so vitally important. And if you have a process for doing that, my comment on that would be make sure it's really robust, and it's not just teaching people to ask great questions, because that's not what coaching is.
I think that's really important, Liv, isn't it? Is that, and look, I created a document years ago because questions is part of it, right? So I remember, and anyone who wants a copy of this, by the way, send me a message after the session, and you can have it for free. But I created a document, Lib, which was 250 questions to help with one-to-ones, right? Because the managers never had the skill sets and weren't trained in a certain way. What I quickly found is that we could really improve that part of them, right? And once you ask the right question and you understand how to probe and that type of stuff, then you start getting into this really deep stuff that you can then uncover and then you can fix. So I saw it as the gateway to good coaching. So you're right, it's not all about the questions, but it's the gateway of getting in so you can understand more about them, and then you can help them in different ways. So I've got a document that will help you ask the correct questions about, like, is it about the person, is it about their health, is it about their family, what they do in work, about development, about their managers. There's a whole host of sections, and each one has about 10 or 15 different questions in it. So if anyone wants a copy of that, just send me a message and I'll send you a link after the session, or we'll do it in the follow-up in the group. Where you'll get that free of charge. So yeah, really good, Lib, really good. Helen, over to you on managers' workloads allow for meaningful employee support.
Yeah, this is really important, because ultimately overloaded managers essentially become reactive and unavailable, and they can't coach, as Libby's just been talking about. They don't notice wellbeing issues, and essentially their team's development possibilities and prospects become overlooked. So this essentially becomes like a vicious cycle of exhaustion from the manager's point of view and underperformance from them and the team. So when managers are overstretched, I guess the entire culture becomes more transactional. You get broken bonds. Team members start to feel overlooked and essentially undervalued as well. So I guess ways of doing this is ensuring that workloads are consistently reviewed, ensuring that there is a percentage of the time, whether that's 20%, 30% of a manager's time, that is actually explicitly spent on people management. You might need to use time audits or sort of that kind of thing, really, just to make sure that there's sort of a maximum number of reports that manager might have, or something or other, and make sure that operational coverage isn't creeping through reactive situations into leadership time as well, and that leadership time is actually gleaned as an essential part of someone's job if they are a manager as well. The impact of this enables like a modelling of sustainable leadership throughout the organisation. It gives managers permission really to lead and not just firefight all the time. And overall, the idea behind this is that it prevents burnout, it improves communication across teams, and essentially creates a much more stable environment.
Yeah, massively important. And look, why do we keep giving? Like I said this earlier on, Hell, why do we keep giving the good ones more? I know they're going to complete it. I know they're going to do it. It's just, yeah, it's not right. I used to have a thing I used to do, Hell, is that if you constantly having to put in overtime, right, there's something wrong. If you can't do your job in the time that you've got, then somewhere along the lines you're doing some things that don't need doing, in my eyes, right? So that time and task piece is really key. I see this with a lot of organizations that I go into. So I'll go in and do like a customer service review, and I'll give them a load of objectives, and then I always leave them with and say, yeah, you're going to do them, fine. But what happens is they're already busy, and then we go and ask them to do more, and then we wonder why they never did it. Well, the key is stripping back some of that stuff that doesn't need to be doing. Or can we delegate it down? We don't normally teach people how to delegate when we do management either, which I'll come on to. It feeds nice into the development plan exists for managers. And you said something that's really important that I always say. So I ask managers this question all the time. So if you manage someone, I always say to them, can you show me how they're better this month than they were last month? Right? You know, your job is to develop them and make them better. Can you show me how they're better this month? What have you done to make them better? It's a really important question to ask yourself when you do this. If you went back and looked at every single member that's underneath you, how have you made them better this month? And if your job is not making them better, then I think the key behind it is that's your job, right? That's you know, your job not anymore is not about doing what you used to do. It's about making those better at doing that. Now, I don't know what your management development plan looks like in your organization, right? But I go to a lot of organizations that don't have one. Okay, so ideally you would have people doing this before they become a manager. But worst case scenario, when they do become a manager, now topics I'd have in here would be understanding people, sort of disc profiling, you know, how to get the best out of people. It would be how to do appraisals, how to do coaching. It would be how to understand, how to influence a budget, not just to understand the budget. It would have questions like how to interview people properly in assessment days and how to run them. I'm trying to think which other project management. There's another bleeding one that gets thrown at you. I remember when I was in Fitness First, I was 22 years of age, and they said we're about to do a £350,000 upgrade. Can you manage the process? And I'm thinking, all right, yeah, I haven't got Prince 2 qualification. I didn't understand it. So all these really important aspects that we've talked about, every single one of these sections up to now has said, is the manager trained? Is the manager trained? Are they trained in this process? All of those processes should be part of your management development program. So I just think it's absolutely essential. And if you haven't got one, then okay, that'll explain it then. But the key behind it is that I've said it before, we often give people a badge. I call it the most amazing badge in the history of, where there used to be a receptionist or a duty manager, whatever it may be, but now they're a manager and now they understand everything and it's all nice and clear. So, you know, a show of hands again, who's got an actual management development program in place, which would be like 12 topics over the year that you're going to go through to make them better at what they do? Sort of, Chris, yeah. So we got a sort of there, and Rona's, yeah, that's good. So we've got 2 in there. And again, Rona, any of this type of stuff, if you can share any of the stuff that you go through, this is what this group's really about, right? It's about, you know, I've got a load of ideas of all the courses and all the things I think you should cover. You know, I'm happy to share that in the community group that I'm gonna explain to you later on. But you know, if this group does have some of this stuff, we don't need to recreate the wheel. Right, we're in a hard enough job as it is, right? So if we can share stuff between ourselves, then that's just amazing, and that'll be great. Okay, Libby, over to you. Oh, another biggie.
Walking the
floor, checking standards.
So my experience in hospitality was I managed from the restaurant floor or the kitchen. So if we were operational, I wasn't in the office. I was working with the team on the floor. So it kind of struck me when I started working with the team in leisure that there'd be a lot of time spent in the office, and I might go to site, eyeball a load of things that the manager probably didn't have a handle on. And so I'd have these conversations about why do you walk the floor, and often it would be workload. But I think that walking the floor is a great opportunity to get to know your team, see what's going on, pick up on any issues, and it helps kind of imbibe that culture of togetherness. And interestingly, I used to have lots of conversations with this with the team at Brimham's, and I was thinking about this last night, and I remember a conversation where we were kind of talking about it in a workshop environment, about ways of improving, kind of having eyes on issues. And one of the team, she was like, I do walk the floor, but I've just realised I always walk the floor in exactly the same way, and I never change what I do. So I'm not seeing everything. And so she kind of picked that up for herself, that actually she was missing things just because she had a routine and she needed to kind of make it a bit more dynamic. So that's all I want to say about it, really, is it is, you know, we're operational settings. That's where the stuff's happening. And it's a way of basically making sure that our culture is where we want it to be. So yeah, if you do it or you don't do it, I think it's a conversation. If you don't, if it's not happening, it's a conversation with how can we change that. So yeah, but I think it's a great measure of the culture in your organisation.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. To me, this is one of the most important things. You know, you don't know he's a manager because of the badge they've got on. You know because of the presence that they offer and the fact that they are walking the building. You know, I go into a lot of organisations and they say, "How do you keep catching me do stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm looking." Right, it's you know, I've walked around. I do this thing called the King's Visit, which is walking around. If I was the king, what would you change? If the king was coming in tomorrow, would you get rid of the spiders' webs? Would you get rid of the tea by the bin? Would you make sure that the toilet rolls were full, or do you want them to do the penguin? It doesn't matter. I won't go into that, right? But the reality behind it is this walking the floor is essential. And I remember someone saying to me, "What's the difference between sort of McDonald's and leisure?" And in McDonald's, I remember my first day, the manager set me 5 tasks to do. I went up to him and said, "I've finished them." And he went, "Okay, come and show me." And he walked around me and went, "Okay, that's okay, but I need to do this a little tiny bit better." And he spent probably 10 or 15 minutes with me. The next time he asked me if I'd done my job, I said, "Yeah, I've done it." He went, "Okay, come and show me." And because I was better, it took him 10 minutes. And then the next time it took him 5 minutes. And then after that, he'd just go, yeah, absolutely fine, brilliant, mate, crack on. Now in leisure, we go, "Signed off, nice one." Right, and I'm not saying all of you do this, right, because I'm assuming that you all do check your standards, but and one of the things that gets me here is you should be walking the floor during your busiest times. For the life of me, I see all the managers go home before it gets busy. That'd be like working in a nightclub and going home before it opens. Right, I just find it absolutely mental that managers aren't there at the most important times when the most people are. It's a really big problem with leisure, and probably why we lose 60% of our members a year, because we don't get to see what the changing rooms are like during at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, when they're absolutely rammed. So yeah, walking the floor, checking the standards at the busiest times, you're going to have the biggest impact in the business. Brilliant. Okay, next one, Hel. We're now move. Oh, sorry, has anyone got anything we should add for manager effectiveness? We can't be doing that good that you can't add anything to us. You're all far too good for this. There must be something we need to add. No, we are that good. Okay, we will move on. So the next one, huge. Oh, I want another show of hands here. Has anyone ever been to a shite meeting? Hey, at least we got a good show of hands on that one. Brilliant. Now we'll talk through meeting effectiveness, Hel. So do you want to start this off, mate?
Yeah, I think, meetings essentially are like a microcosm of a company's overall culture. How people behave in those meetings, such as who speaks, who listens, who leads the way, who follows through afterwards. These are, what we would say are sort of seemingly small things, but they essentially reflect how people behave elsewhere within the organisation. If you think about a leisure environment where time is scarce and rotas are complex, poor meetings, and this is the same in other environments as well, poor meetings don't just waste time, they actually end up breeding frustration and boredom and fatigue, essentially. Whereas actually on the flip side of that, a good meeting signals discipline, it creates inclusion of all the people within that environment, and clarity. And those 3 things, so discipline, inclusion and clarity, are actually 3 really strong foundations of cultural health. So when we look at the first point of all meetings have clear stated purposes and agendas, this is huge. We've all had those meetings, as Craig just said, that are rubbish. They could have been an email. I mean, I'm guilty of like going off on a tangent in my meetings as well. Love a tangent. But if you think about it, if a meeting could become an email, emails go unread, they won't necessarily be absorbed. So it's super important that when we do have meetings that we actually get them right. So, the agenda and making sure that there's a purpose to the meeting. Without that, it wastes money, time, people's feelings of goodwill because they just get annoyed by it. In a leisure setting specifically, you're going to end up with people coming off the floor, which then affects the level of service as well. So if you have clarity in a meeting, it allows people to prepare, to be focused and to contribute meaningfully as well. one of the things that we should obviously make sure is to include a calendar invite, as Craig's just said as well, so that there's no issues really in terms of people knowing that it was happening. Send relevant and detailed agendas at least a couple of days beforehand, with time allocations and expected outcomes as well. And Libby will love this, is any meetings without an agenda should be cancelled. I think the point of this is essentially it creates, again, that whole psychological safety element by setting expectations of the teams and the people that are coming. They know why they're showing up and they know what it's for. This is actually cited a lot with people with neurodiversity, and they want to know what a meeting's for because it can create a feeling of anxiety of what they've done. Are they going to get sacked? You know, are they in trouble? That kind of thing. But actually, this applies, I think, to everyone generally. We want to know why we're going to a meeting. We want to know what it's for. And we want to know the expectation of us within that meeting as well. It reinforces accountability. It gives focus for the actual meeting instead of just like blindly wading our way through. And obviously, you know, if people have been given an agenda and they're not prepared within that meeting, then that is on them. And then there's a call to action there as well. Next one is action items have clear owners and deadlines. Again, massive thing. If there is ambiguity, this can essentially kill momentum. We can't move on if we don't know what anybody's supposed to be doing or who's supposed to be doing what. So without ownership and follow-up, discussions that you have in these meetings are just pointless. And then there's a danger that cynicism spreads amongst the team because everybody knows nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to be actioned, nothing will change. So nothing changes if nothing changes ultimately. So we have to give clear accountability, and this then in itself fosters trust and progress as well. So every action that is cited within a meeting should be allocated a named owner. There should be a deadline, you know, the old SMART goals, and a success measure of some sort is what deems the action that's going to be taken to be a success. There's so much AI out at the moment that it's either you can have someone taking minutes, or you could literally use an AI tool that literally records the whole meeting and then summarizes the meeting. A summary of the meeting should be sent out within 24 hours. And there should be some sort of tracked progress in a shared system like Libby was talking about earlier. And then there should be sort of a review of how have the actions actually been completed before or at the start of the next meeting as well. All of these sort of small actions, they reinforce the idea of basically people have there's reliability, ultimately, there's transparency, and there's trust as well. It creates a sort of like cultural glue. So when people see actions ticked off, I love a tick box, done. You can also see visible progress as well. And then the belief in the leadership strengthens as well, because we know that they're going to hold people accountable.
Really help. One of the things that I used to put into all my meetings was it was called the 3-star rule. So if someone's been set an objective or a goal or anything, if they turn up the week after and that hasn't been done, it gets 1 star. Now, their job is if they can't fulfill this and they need to speak to me, that's absolutely fine, or whoever their manager is or whoever needs to help them, but they need to get this. So if they turn up the week after and it gets 2 stars, then if it gets 3, it's their problem, right? Because they've had the opportunity to make sure that this has been dealt with or to speak to someone and to hand it over. But having that 3-star rule really made people sort of, it never ever got to 3 stars. Right, so just having something in place to manage that particular process means that the meetings become so much more effective. And again, I when I'm training people to run meetings, I always used to get them to score them, Hel. So it's about, you know, did actions come out? Was there an agenda sent? So all these different bits and pieces. You know, what percentage would the last meeting that you ran get? And why does the manager have to be the one that talks all the time? You know, there's Libby's going to come on to this now, I'm sure, with the facilitation bit, but there's 7 different types of brainstorming. There's loads of different types of methods. You know, you can train people. It might be a quiz, it might be an interactive session, it might be role play. I don't like role play, but you get the idea. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done, right? But the reality behind it is that all these different things are so key. Sorry, Liv, I probably stole your thunder a bit there, mate, but come on, facilitation.
No, it's fine. I actually thought I hated role play, but I have found a love of it. It's such an effective, particularly effective coaching tool, actually. So yeah, maybe I'll do a bit of role play. No, I'm joking. So meetings, basically, we don't train people to run effective meetings, and if it's a favourite thing for people to show me their calendars now when they're talking to me, they go, look at my calendar, and it's all back-to-back meetings, isn't it? And I reckon if we did some training, we could cut loads of those meetings out, make lots of them shorter, go and get some great ideas from them, and all them all be productive. So essentially it's about thinking about just I mean, Craig said there's loads of different ways of running meetings. You can have stand-up meetings. That if you want a short meeting, make it stand-up meeting because people won't hang around. Yeah, think about putting a training in if you don't have it already. And also that leads into workshops. So a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is kind of that co-collaboration. If you want to co-collaborate and get people working together, you're going to have to run workshops and get people in the same room. And that also, you need to be trained as a facilitator to do that, because often when you're together, either having a meeting or in a workshop and you're asking people for ideas, it can become combative sometimes, and you need to be, as a facilitator, you need to be able to shut that down or move it out to a different room, or be constructive about how you have that discussion, which we touched on earlier. So yeah, it's, I think, something that, if I think back in the local authority that I worked in, I think there was a bite-size online meeting training, but I think it's something that we should think about having if we don't already, and think it makes all the difference.
It's more important than that, Liv, isn't it? It's more important than a 5-minute bite size, right? It's one of the, you know, if I've got 10 people in the room for 2 hours, it's probably costing me, that could be costing me £500. If you were going to spend £500 somewhere else, right, you'd probably have to put a whole document together to say why you're doing it. So I think this is, I asked these questions. I did a presentation up in Scotland for all the universities, the Scottish sports students event or something, and I asked the question I asked you lot before: has anyone ever been to a shite meeting? Put your hand up. Everyone's hand went up. I asked people in the room, because they were quite senior, is that leave your hand up if you've actually ran meetings, and pretty much every hand stayed up. And then I asked them, put your hand up if you've been trained how to run meetings in the organisation you're in now, and 90% of the hands come down. And I went, I think we just found the problem. You know, it's such an important thing. Meetings are hard to run. They're really hard to run. You know, understanding the dynamics of the team, who should be saying what, why does he keep sprouting out and saying everything all the time? Why does she ask a question only 5 minutes before we leave and everyone starts fuming because they're going to get stuck in traffic? It's all that stuff. It's all key information. So meetings, to me, are a major part of communication and doing things right. But they should be thorough. They should be going through the right stuff, and you should come prepared. But yeah, amazing. Next one, Lib, is, so has anyone else got anything we should add for meetings? Come on, you lovely people, whack something in that chat for us.
We need to be a bit conscious of time, Craig, because we've only got an hour.
I know.
So stop talking.
I know, but this is the bit, isn't it? I think it's key. I think these are important bits. We can speed up on these bits anyway. We're fine.
We need to get you in some webinar facilitation training.
I know. Well, this is the problem. The problem is, right, we're trying to change culture or talk about every single thing that we need to do in an organisation in 3 hours. So the reality is, it might be, if you lot want, I'd happily do sessions on other parts of this. Right, I think that's the key, is that this is a bit of a taster to say, wow, we take this back, measure it, find out what's not working, and then we could put some sort of workshops or stuff together on how to fix some of the bits, not just measure them. Okay, Libby, learning development audit, IDPs.
So,
that thing that has to be done in July, because the HR said. Well,
the question here is, the normal process is, you do your appraisal, an annual appraisal, don't you, with a 6-month review. You do your annual appraisal. That's probably where you talk about training need. And then you should be doing your one-to-ones, hopefully, and hopefully you'll get your training need onto the one-to-ones, because as the leader you're wanting to, if it's a valid training requirement, you should be looking for opportunities for that person. That's kind of the process that an OD person will tell you has to happen, and then you should have a process where that gets onto a central thing that's tracked by whether it's HR or OD or whoever does that. So that would be a standard kind of process. So my experience, and this is not just of leisure, it's of lots of different services within organisations that I've worked in, that doesn't really happen. So but if that doesn't happen, and we're not growing our people, we're not making them feel valued, we're losing the impact of what they can have on our organisation, the organisational performance. So it's kind of a really vital thing to have. So the question is, do you do it? Have you got a process for it? And if you haven't, then sort of think about the impact that has on your culture. So that's what I've got to say about that.
I think it being live is important, though, isn't it? It's everyone's sort of probably got one because they have to, but is it live?
Yeah,
and is it
you've got it. Yeah, are you discussing it regularly? Which is why it's really handy to have it in that one-to-ones. For me, yeah. I would like to have an eye on it, because sometimes opportunities come up, and if you've done an annual appraisal with somebody and you're 8 months down the line and you haven't thought about it, and there's opportunities and it's not at the forefront of your brain, you're kind of missing opportunities to develop your people, and they're losing out as well, which isn't great. So yeah, it's vital really to have some sort of process for that you've got eyes on, and that leads into development goals are linked to business needs. So I guess the story I have here is I'd have individual sites, so the training budget sat within my department, and I'd have sort of individual sites saying we need pool plant, and we had plenty of people trained on pool plant, but we weren't utilising those resources, and we were putting pressure. And I don't know what your training budgets are like, but the normal training budget is minuscule with a massive ambition around it. So it's about thinking about what's your strategy for your organisation? What are you trying to do over 5 years? And what skills do you need in the organisation to push that forward? And then obviously you've got your stat man stuff that you have to have. But are you using your training budget to the best, to maxing it out, to basically hit your strategic targets? Or are you just kind of willy-nilly training people to do stuff because you're getting requests through for it? And I think that's the question. So that's why that's in there, because it's vitally important. And I think it's dead easy to say yes to people or training, isn't it? Because we want to grow people, but it might not be necessarily the right thing for the organisation.
Yeah, I've seen a load of people in the organisation who went on a swim teachers course. He's put 6 people on a swim teachers course, but they had no capacity to put any more classes on, which I just thought was a bit strange, because they all left and went somewhere else and used the skill. Mentoring, I'm going to keep this nice and short. Have you got one? You need one. You should have one. And if you've got them cross-departmental, this really, really helps. That's the fastest one I'm going to do. See, Hal, I'm moving on. That's the new me. Libby, succession planning.
Succession planning kind of speaks for itself. I mean, it's a public sector problem, this, where there isn't succession plan in place. Links back to, are we developing people? Are we training them? Do we know what we're doing? Often, you'll have somebody vital to your organisation leave, and you put somebody in their place who's just not trained and developed to do that role, and that has a massive organisational impact, and not just on kind of performance, but then on culture. So yeah, the question is, do you have a succession plan, and does it identify and develop talent, which kind of goes back to all the things we've been talking about.
H, learning is protected and respected. Go on, H.
So when we think about culture and learning, I guess if you're not learning, you're basically deteriorating. If you place that even in just like the most simple, like beauty and hairdressing or something like that, would you go to a hairdresser who hasn't had training in 20 years, or they're still cutting hair like we did 20 years ago, or a beauty therapist who hasn't got the latest knowledge and is doing stuff that doesn't work as effectively as something that has been brought out in the last couple of years? Essentially, basic all human, that there's a human motivation theory that says that growth, autonomy and mastery are essential psychological needs. So when those things are actually missing, people get apathetic and this breeds disconnection, there's disengagement, people don't feel as if they're being developed, and they essentially just switch off. So actually learning and development itself helps to build optimism in people. They start to feel as if they've got something to look forward to. They feel like they're progressing, and they cope better with changes overall as well. So obviously, all that said, we've got to make sure that that time is actually protected. It's all very well saying that we're going to develop people, but if we say we develop people, but actually you've got to find the time somewhere amongst your hectic schedule to actually do that, then if an organisation says it values development but it doesn't give people the time, then that's really not very conducive to proper learning. I guess the sense of giving people that time gives them a sense of progress. It gives them a sense of control. All of this also is, these are really powerful antidotes to burnout as well, especially in a leisure environment where operations tend to dominate what people do, their diary, their schedule. Actually ring fencing someone's learning time is a really clear cultural insight that growth matters as much as the delivery side as well. So we have to actually build the learning into the operational schedule rather than treating it as like an optional extra. Even like micro learning scenarios where someone might say, okay, half an hour there, something like that, to protect those times, and track the uptake of it as well, so that it's visible and it's valued and it's shown that that person's actually had that learning and development time as well. And it moves the development time from theory to actual practice as well. So when people see their leaders protecting that time, again, it evangelizes this sort of idea of growth and curiosity and development and that kind of thing. So it isn't about, oh, this is time spent away from work. This is actually part of your work.
Yeah. Okay. Learning. So learning is implemented, measured and improved. So I've got an equation that I use when I go out and train organizations. And it's learning event times by the learning transfer. What's the score? So what I mean by that is, let's say, for instance, I go and do a training day on customer service. And let's just say I happen to be good, right? And let's say I got 8 out of 10, right? What's 8 times 0?
0.
0, right? So I may as well have been shite, right? Let's not kid ourselves. I may as well. There's no, from a training perspective, if you're going to go and do this stuff and then you're not going to practice it or you're not going to use it, again, I'll go back to lifeguarding. We teach them a skill on the side of the pool and then they jump in the pool and practice it. And we do this every single month, right? They have to practice the skill. Me teaching my child to ride a bike, I don't give it a load of theory and then go ahead, crack on, right? It's the practice. It's the giving them a softer area to start. It's running alongside them. It's giving them a little push. It's this bit that helps, right? When a new employee comes in, do we put them straight into the busiest site, or do we send them to a quiet site to learn and get inducted so they can slowly learn the system, right? So the key behind it is how are we practicing these things? And again, when I'm doing mentoring or coaching with individuals or senior leaders and stuff, my question is, what do you practice? Now you look at all the different sort of, like, if I want to be a singer, do you think singers practice singing? Of course they do. You want to be a footballer, you want to be a sports person, do you think they go and practice their sport? Yeah. What do you practice? What do you practice to make you better at what you do? Is it question techniques? Is it understanding DISC and how you can judge situations? Is it how many possibilities you pulled out of a meeting from what people were saying? What do you practice? Right? So this learning transfer is more important. Someone used to go on an MDQ level 2 in LA Fitness. They'd come back to me and I'd go, what are you going to do with it? Right? You've been on this course, you've got this qualification. What are you now going to do in this business? Why are you going to be better because you've been on that course? How are you going to show me that you've used it? Right? So what we do is we send them on a course, they've been on it, and we go, is it any good? Thumbs up, they do a thumb up, and then we don't learn from it. So huge. I was short on that one as well, Hal. Is that good? Getting better, aren't I? Any questions on learning and development before we move on? How is it up to now? Is this making sense? Or the bits you're going to be able to take back and use? Yeah, okay, that's good. So the next bit, well-being audit. So look, I'm a big fan. It wasn't until I spoke to Helen that I realised what well-being was. I've heard well-being get bandied around our industry for far too long without knowing what it actually means. And after a good chat with Helen one day, I remember coming away going, I think I used to do well-being. I think I used to actually look after people. I didn't realise I did. All I used to do was care about my staff and care about the customers. But I didn't realise that's what this really is. And it's about looking after people. So these are going to take this to another level. But yeah, there we go. Libby, mental health resources are available and promoted.
Thanks, Craig. The reason I've got my name against this, because Helen, I think you've got most of the wellbeing audit, is because the organisation that I used to work for, the public sector organisation, had several layers of mental health resources in place. And we were discussing it, Craig, Helen and myself. And Craig thought it was an unusual situation and that we maybe have more than other people. Obviously, mental health is so important, and creating environments where people feel cared for and have that psychological safety is so important. And poor environment has an impact on our mental health. But the resources that my experience of public sector was, we had a 24-hour hotline we could ring and be straight onto a counsellor. And that there would be different pathways on that, and they could put somebody through to like a six sessions of either online or face-to-face counselling. There was you could just get help straight away. As a leader, I used to sometimes use it if I wanted advice. If I had somebody talking to me about stuff and I didn't feel like I was equipped to help them, I would ring that helpline and get help from a qualified therapist. So we had that, and then we had a training program. So I'm trained level 2 mental health awareness, and we also had a mental health first aid training available for people in the organisation. So, we talk about people's mental health all the time. It's vitally important that we look after our people in our organisations. And the reason I'm talking about this is because that's my experience of the organisation that I worked in. But it might not be the same across the board, as I understand it from what Craig's talking about, which really surprised me, actually. So, and he said it's a bit posh in Harrogate. Well, so I don't know if that's why we had all that. But, if you don't have things in place, there's certainly ways you can put things in place. And I think there are free training resources available as well, although I haven't looked into it. But I do believe the training that I did was funded. So, not having that in place doesn't support your people, but also as leaders, it doesn't support you to support your people. So that's why it's on there.
Okay, over to the H-Meister General.
So, Libby makes a very good point, and it was obviously quite a privileged position to be in, to have the access to those kind of services and to have that training for you. But I think in a lot of scenarios, mental health first aid or other sort of point of contacts aren't always available. And I think I've spent the last probably 7 years trying to convince people that well-being isn't just some woo-woo nonsense about yoga days and fruit bowls and perks or slogans and stuff like that, or little one-day workshops and initiatives. It's actually about how people genuinely feel doing their jobs every day. So when you've got pressurized environments, ambiguity or poor management, and these all become normal, then stress and disengagement will automatically follow. When you look at research in organizational psychology, this consistently shows that these kinds of things are the biggest determinants of well-being. That things like job design, workload, autonomy, and social support, these are all things that determine how well someone feels doing a job. And if you think about the leisure environment as well, well-being is often at risk because of lots of constant operational demands, long hours, very reactive problem solving as well. But true well-being, if you like, comes from predictability, fairness, and actually feeling like we have a voice. People want to know what's expected of them. They want to be able to feel like they're safe to raise issues, and they want to see that their efforts are actually valued. So a healthy culture creates conditions for people to perform well, but also to recover well. And that's quite an integral part of this. So when we look at the working arrangements for people, it has to meet diverse needs. People have different lives, they've got different responsibilities, they've got different levels of energy. When organisations impose rigid schedules and ignore individual circumstances, you can have a massive build-up of stress for people, and they're often it's the people who care the most that tend to burn out, or the alternative is people just simply vote with their feet as well. So we have to have inclusive working arrangements in place to ensure that there's an element of trust and respect for the people as well. Now, I know that is quite difficult within a leisure environment because there's schedules and it's very reactive. When my kids were little, I worked in a school for 2 years, and if you think that leisure environments are reactive, having worked in those as well, go and work in a school, because my God, your feet don't touch the ground. And there is a reason why teachers have very long holidays, because you need it. So what we can actually do is audit the working patterns. We can look at flexibility options regularly as well. Consider sort of creative scheduling within the leisure environment as well. Is there an opportunity for role sharing? Is there a phased return option if someone has been off for a while? There has to be an allowance of sort of certain reasonable amount of autonomy in enabling people to swap shifts or have breaks, and training managers to focus on outcomes and not just presenteeism. Is that a question?
No, it's okay.
No, sorry.
So what the effects of actually having this sort of flexible working arrangements, it creates fairness and trust. When people feel like their needs have actually been recognised, when they feel like they're being considered, then there's a massive sense of loyalty. Resentment starts to diminish, and people are much more engaged within their workplace. So flexibility actually becomes a cultural foundation. It's not just conditional of one person's individual circumstances. So boundaries. This is a big one. How many of us, have heard about boundaries always being crossed? Our brain, the human brain, is not designed to be consistently alert all of the time. We have situations where, if you have a situation where an employee has got to respond to messages all the time, or they've got to cover shifts at the last minute, or they've got to be always on, as it were, then your stress hormones kick in and it never fully resets. So over time, what ends up happening, people get over fatigued, they become irritable, they're resentful, and ultimately this has a negative effect on service quality as well. So what we need to actually do is to create where am I? We need to create clear expectations when people can be contacted, certain hours, response times and rest periods. Use technology where it's available, like scheduling software, to protect the time off rather than invade it. And also there has to be a certain amount of modelling from managers as well. Are they placing healthy boundaries themselves? Are they avoiding unnecessary emails and calls? You're not getting the flipping midnight email or 6 o'clock in the morning message or something like that, unless that's an expectation of your role. It just reframes rest as a responsibility, as opposed to just, oh, it's a weakness, someone needs to have a rest. When people see that recovery times are actually respected, they return to work, they're more focused, they're more motivated, and the organisation itself also becomes much more credible as a place that genuinely cares about well-being as well. When we look at workload expectations, this is another one. So if someone feels really chronically overworked, it's going to kill their morale, it's going to damage their physical health, and you're just essentially going to drive attrition. So what you end up with is sort of like when someone feels like they've got an unrealistic workload, it creates like a silent hierarchy that those that are willing to sacrifice their well-being are going to be the ones that rise the fastest. That is not a resilient way of working. It's a really negative form of, reducing someone's character. It's sort of disguised as commitment, but it creates the narrative that overworking is going to be rewarded. So workload distribution should actually be regularly reviewed where possible, and expectations should be adjusted during peak times. So if it's a really busy time, Craig's talking about walking the floor during busy times, is that appropriate? Is it a case of that person's the expectations of certain criteria is not expected during those peak times, or is that in January when the whole world and their dog is coming into your centre? So it's looking at rotas as well and looking for early warning signs where possible. You've got to build recovery time into a schedule after major busy times. So if it's been really manic, have you given people the opportunity to recover or have a slightly less intense schedule during busy, after busy seasons? So it's sort of including well-being as a KPI and as a metric, not just an output, as it were. What you end up here is with something that normalizes balance, it gives sustainability, and when the leadership team are seen as people that value consistency over intensity, people feel like they have permission to perform at their best over the long term. So a sustainable workload turns well-being from a personal responsibility into a shared organizational discipline.
I think the thing that's really important to you, Hal, is that, so one of the things that we brought into our business is that we have diary management tools. So obviously it's part of Microsoft Suite. It's called it's called Bookings. Now, if you book on that, it gives you 15 minutes to prep for any meeting, and it gives you 50. We created so it's got 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after. So we don't just get this back to back. Teams is an absolute killer for this. Someone sees a gap on your calendar and they go, bing, it's now full, and it's like, So by using, rather than giving people direct access to diaries, give them direct access to the booking stuff, and you can solve little bits like that. Hell, I just think Teams since Teams is coming after COVID, the amount of back-to-back meetings that people end up in, and then you've got to be like Rain Man about 9:30, remembering in the evening, trying to remember all these 14 meetings that you've had today and how to follow them up effectively. And it just becomes really, really difficult. So yeah, really, really good one. Any points on well-being before we move on, you lovely peeps? No? Okay, that's good. We are now going to, this is another nice one. So recognition and appreciation. Wow, imagine that.
This
Hal,
is actually,
over to you.
Yeah, this is actually a big one. Recognition is like an emotional currency. If people can handle a pressurized situation, they can handle a certain element of ambiguity, they can cope with failures, but being invisible is not something that generally people can actually do. It basically creates people to become cynical, they disengage, they're just not interested. There's actually neuroscience evidence to show that authentic recognition, I'll come to that in a second, activates the brain's reward system, and so you produce dopamine and oxytocin as well, and that produces a sense of belonging. Which is when you get more pride and people trust, and they'll value that a lot more than even a pay rise, to be honest. But we should bear in mind that the opposite is also the case as well, so that when praise isn't there or it's totally insincere, it can actually trigger the same neural responses as social rejection. So a bit of a weird one. So if you think about the leisure sector, where many roles are really demanding and customer facing, like even small acts of appreciation carry quite a lot of weight. So even a thank you at the right time can reset morale at a really difficult time, or it can rekindle a sense of pride in someone's work that might be repetitive or dull, and it just generally makes people feel seen.
Okay, so managers are trained in effective recognition techniques. And look, I've learnt loads of stuff over the years. I remember a manager, I used to work in a hotel, 400 staff, and the hotel manager said to me, look, if you spend, I want you to speak to five, I want you to sort of recognize 5 people per day. He said 3 of them, you might only give them 2 minutes. He said the other 2, you're going to give them 5 minutes each. So for 15 minutes a day, it meant that over that week, I'd speak to 25 people. Over the month, I'd speak to 100. And it wasn't long before I'd virtually spoke to everyone within the organization once you broke it down in that way. And it was a very, very simple task. And it was really, really important. So little things like that. I remember years ago, when I was untrained, I used to do a reward and recognition in all my meetings. I used to give everyone a bottle of wine. Do you know why? Because I love wine and everyone should be like me. I remember some girl was measuring the meeting, because part of what I used to do is I wanted to measure me. How good am I at doing this? So we could teach her the things that she could do. And she sat me down and she went, look, that was really good. We'd never had recognition here before, but you realise 2 of the people that won it don't drink. And I was like, oh. So then when I troubleshooted and went into another site, the first thing I did on a sit down, I said, look, if I had £2, £5 and £10, what would I buy you? Right. And then next time I did the reward ceremony, it was personal to that individual. Right. And so understanding that different people, you know, in this profile, as example, the Ds might want to, they want to be stand up on a pedestal in front of everyone and go, look how good I am. The steadies don't like that. They hate it. I've got to pull them together and have a chat. So training people to understand, you know, understand people and how they like to be recognized and what works for them. And look, an email doesn't work for everyone. Do you know when someone sends out that generic email saying, thanks team, you've been amazing this month, and everyone's like, okay, nice one.
Can
so
I just,
also...
I'm sorry, I'm going to do you, Craig. I just really wanted to say something. Something that I forgot to say was actually becoming really specific with the praise that you give someone, letting them know, you know, what it is that they've done, why it's valued, and what the effects of doing it are. Is as long as it's done in an authentic way and it's not like really superficial, then that makes a real difference rather than just a good job, like a generic good job, because it makes people feel valued, and that can also, it's not just the onus isn't just then on the manager, it's also people that disseminates within the team as well. Sorry.
No, it's good. No, and I think one of the things which is over here, Hel, because a lot of these things on the end, so it talks about the STAR model: situation, task, action, results. So you're right. It's about it's no one likes a generic, right? That's not what we're looking for here. So, but the key behind it is, and lots of recognition doesn't have to be paid for. Right, it's, you know, reward systems and things that you can have in organizations are really, really key, right? You know, and there was loads of things that we used to do, but it's not, you know, in McDonald's we used to get rewarded with lots of things, right? And look, whether I like McDonald's or not's a different thing. I didn't particularly like the job, but it's the best company I've ever worked for, and I say that after working for myself twice. So I think the reality behind it is there's certain things that we can bring in to do these things quite easy, but training people, again, it's another point. It's not easy to reward people effectively. So you don't just assume you know how to do it. Let success stories are shared broadly across the organisation.
You're on mute, Libby.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I had a technical glitch there. Pressure. Yeah, well, I mean, we've just had the feel good about appreciation and recognition, and it's so vital, isn't it? And then we have all these, we've spoken about silos, and if you are experiencing that in your organisation, I'm sure there's loads of brilliant things happening, but other people don't get to hear about it. So it doesn't spread, but it doesn't create a kind of a cohesion across the organisation if you don't share those stories. If you do share those stories where people are struggling or maybe not finding a way to do something, they can see somebody else has done it. It creates connection. So there's various ways of doing this. I would suggest once you've kind of audited your comms channels and whether they're being used or not, then it's kind of understanding how it's best to share these things on comms channels and who kind of takes the lead on that. But yeah, it's so vitally important, I think, to share and not just success stories from the organization, but sometimes people do have personal achievements that they want to share, particularly in this sector where people will go and do a sporting achievement like an Ironman or something like that, and to share that across the organization. I just think it's a really great way of building a culture where people start to get to know each other and care about each other and their achievements and see things are possible.
Yeah, it makes it real, doesn't it? Right, which is it brings it to life. I can see that Alex has put on there about they do Testimonial Tuesday. But there's another really good question that you've mentioned there, Alex, which is like staff, products and feedback. It's like, who gave the best feedback this month? Who's got, do you reward people for coming up with ideas? Right, that type of stuff. It's so easy to do, right? But we just sometimes forget to do it. So that's really, really important. And also something I forgot to mention is that there's a thing that your ITs will, if you're on Teams, which most of you probably will be, if you're on Microsoft Suite, there's a thing called Viva Insights. Now I use this in our business, right? Now sometimes I get busy like everyone else, right? So different meetings, demos, doing this type of stuff, free of charge, of course, because you're lovely. But we get busy doing all these types of things, right? Now I sometimes I forget to thank the staff. Right, so there's a thing called Viva Insights that is part of Microsoft Suite, and that sends me a little message every week, and it basically says to me, "Look, Craig, anyone done anything good this week?" And I'm like, it makes me stop and I go, "Oh, do you know what? She was brilliant at this," or "Greg was brilliant at this," and it reminds me to, because I forget, right? I'm human. I get busy and I get sidetracked. But one of the things is I probably 3 weeks of that month, I probably make sure that someone in my team gets rewarded by something. Sometimes it'll go directly to them, sometimes it'll go to the group, but the key behind it is that there's tools out there to help us, and you probably already paid for them. But Viva Insights is very worth looking at. There's also Viva Learning as well, which has got loads of online modules that you could use to develop managers and help them with well-being and stuff as well. Sorry, Liv, I've derailed you again. It's my fault.
I didn't realise I was next again. What is it? Recognition, effectiveness. Well, you can't manage what you don't measure. We all know that, don't we? So yeah, when you're looking at your scorecard, think, have you got a measure in for your recognition program, whatever that looks like? Are you measuring how many? We used to have a system called Stars Card, which was like Marmite. People loved it or hated it. This was in the local authority, and you could give someone a Stars Card if they'd gone above and beyond. So you could do things like measure how many of those had been like sent out, and also then people could put them in a central kind of raffle to be the kind of the winner of the month, and they'd win a prize. So you can measure those sorts of things, and if you're giving out cards and people aren't putting them in the central raffle, then it's not landing, is it? So there's ways of doing it, but yeah, you can't manage what you don't measure, so you put it in place. If you're not keeping an eye on it, then you don't know what the impact is.
Which leads on nicely to the next one, which is the Edmondson scale,
which is me again. So yeah, so psychological safety, essentially, if you're not sure, it's basically the ability to speak up, make mistakes, take risks without fear of negative consequences. And you can measure it. There are several ways of measuring it. The Edmondson scale is really simple. It measures those things around people's ability to make mistakes, speak up and take risks. It's 7 questions, so it's fairly easy to manage. If you don't do it and you want to do it and you want to give it a go, I would suggest you do it within teams. So pull a team together into a workshop environment, but make sure that they can fill it in without, it stays, confidential. Because if you're starting to do this sort of stuff, often people don't want to. But if you do it in a team, you can create a spirit around it. So if you don't do it and you want to start doing it, the Edmondson scale is a really kind of great introduction to doing that. But if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. So that's why that's in there.
Team psychological safety is regularly. Oh yeah, sorry, that's the one you just done. Oh, next one's me. A clear conflict resolution exists in the know. So again, this goes back to that bit we did earlier on about conflict, right? It's massively key that you've got to train people in being able to deal with this, right? It's one of the biggest problems is when you let people sort of get away with bullying behaviour, or the same person speaks at every meeting and they start railroading things. it's all those different bits and pieces. You know, the same people get all the nice shifts because they're his mate. You know, Steve always puts you on the good shifts. I've always got the Sunday graveyard shift and it's crap. So the reality behind it is that there's all these different methods, and it's always about fairness and consistency, right? But I think that the key behind this is making sure that there's a way for people. One of the biggest problems I find is that, you know, you can go and speak to your manager. What if he's the, what if he's the pain, right? What if he's the problem, right? Where do I go then? Oh, I go to his boss, who's his mate, and it's like, oh, okay. So, you know, some of the things we've discussed earlier on is the different routes or the different ways, which is obviously, you know, how can I get this message across? Are there multiple ways of raising these concerns, or am I just stuck to I can only go and speak to my manager? But absolutely, conflict has to be dealt with, and there has to be a way for them to be able to say things in a safe space. You're right, Liv, when you talked before about anonymous stuff. You know, I see a lot of people who do anonymous stuff that's not that anonymous, right? Which, you know, don't put your name in, but tell us your job role. Well, there's only one fitness manager, me. You know what I mean? So just be careful about how you do those things and break it down. It's meant to be fair. It's meant to be fearful for them, and making sure that there's all different types of ways. So you'll see in all these bits and pieces over here. You know, is there only one way and can it be blocked? Are there, you know, what are the multiple routes? And it gives you some examples of things you want to try, and bits and pieces of where you could do that, which is good. Now we go on to H, talking about crucial conversations and the training for this being provided.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. There's from a neurological perspective, when you have fear, it actually activates the amygdala, which is the brain's threat center, and that tends to restrict focus and suppress any sort of rational thinking. So if you look at that in simple terms, if someone doesn't feel safe, like Libby's talked a lot about psychological safety, and I'm very much on that bandwagon as well, then someone will stop thinking clearly. So when you think about that in an operational environment, this has the practical consequence of things like you're going to be taking shortcuts for safety, you're going to have massive communication breakdowns, and you're going to have a lot of blame culture as well. So if you have a culture that has psychological safety, they will not avoid conflict. They'll actually try and handle it as intelligently as possible. And obviously you can't do that without any form of training. The idea behind it is it encourages sort of open dialogue, accountability without humiliation, and it can actually be like a source of growth rather than division. It's about being honest and fair and respectful ultimately. So if we're honest, most of us probably are not naturally skilled at having difficult conversations. We either avoid them or we don't. We'll handle them emotionally. If you think about, you know, when you're having it with your family or something like that, or with friends, and it can create sort of defensiveness or resentment. So having people trained in having those crucial conversations takes the emotions out of it. So you have to have them ideally when emotions are not running high, or if you are having them, you know how to have them, and it can transform the culture from like a passive aggressive type of environment to much more productive. So in that sense, if you're in a psychologically safe environment, then disagreement isn't perceived as a danger. It's actually this is data. So if we're providing structured training for people in handling those sensitive conversations, we need to be covering things like how do we gain emotional regulation, how do we introduce active listening, how do we ensure that we're reframing those techniques, if you like, giving them reframing techniques for using in those situations. Libby talked about role play earlier. Love a bit of role play, and they can be used, but using them from like real life scenarios. So it's you could be looking at things like, I don't know, underperformance, breaches of boundaries, interpersonal tension between teams or people, and this should be sort of regularly reinforced as well, with refreshers on an ongoing way. And actually what this does is it tends to build maturity in people, because they learn how to actually handle those situations without fear. And then also throughout, in terms of culture, throughout the organisation, when employees actually see issues addressed promptly and respectfully, then trust is built in the leadership as well, and knowing that that can actually happen without it basically it normalizes honesty and sees it not as confrontation but as being caring ultimately.
And I think, look, in leisure, we get put into some really bad situations, right? You know, in front of customers, in front of people and stuff like that. Now, you're not really always in control of the situation, but you are in control of how you react to it. So those reframing mechanisms, Hal, are absolutely essential to this bit. But again, you know, there's a theme that comes through this whole thing, right? And it's the training and the development, and not just giving them a bloody badge in the first place and assuming that it's going to be okay. Okay, look, we're on our final. Tell you what, we've done all right. You know, we're on our final 2 points. We're on retention and turnover. So, Libby, this is about comprehensive exit interviews are conducted. Fire away.
So I think probably everybody would agree they have, I hope everybody would say they've got an exit interview in place. What my experience of is, and this is not leisure specific, this is a public sector thing, is I've moved quite a few job roles within the same organisation and then moved from the organisation and was never offered an exit interview, even though I knew there was a system in place to have one and a process. So firstly, have you got an exit interview? What's your process? Are you offering them as standard, and also ensuring that if somebody accepts an exit interview, they can choose who that exit interview is carried out by, because as Helen said, people don't leave organisations, they leave managers. So you're not going to get really great data if somebody's got to have that conversation with their manager. They're either going to avoid it or they're not going to be honest. So ensuring you've kind of got people trained to do those exit interviews and are able to step in and do that role where it's requested. So that's gives you loads of data from an exit interview about how people felt working for you. And if you do it well, you'll get loads of honest data as well. So that's fabulous information to have to measure your culture.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And what's more important, Liv, is what you do with the information that you get back. Right? It's, you know, this will tell you if that manager, if everyone's saying the same thing about a particular person, maybe it's true. Do you know what I mean? Maybe, I know he's your mate, but maybe he is a bit of a, nearly swore again. But yeah, you get it. Okay, last but not least, H, over to you.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what Libby and Craig said there, you know, retention ultimately is like a cultural scoreboard. It's a horrible way to put it, but you can measure all sorts of things. You can measure engagement, you can measure well-being and everything, but actually what gives the real picture is who leaves and when and how many people. So if you have a high turnover, that's not just a coincidence. It's basically a sort of verdict on what the leadership's like, what the trust is like, what's the workload like, that kind of thing. Because people rarely leave an organisation just for pay. They might not join an organisation for pay, or I'm not saying it's not compelling to have the opportunity to earn a lot more, but often there'll be other factors like, you know, poor management, lack of development, or they just generally feel invisible or like they don't matter, essentially. So when you look at the sort of cultural sorry, I'm losing my way, bear with me. When you look at the research, generally what you find is that the strongest predictors of retention are actually sort of supportive managers, fair treatment, a sense of belonging, all those sorts of things as well. So in the leisure sector specifically, when you think about where employees may work long hours, irregular hours, that sense of belonging becomes like the glue that keeps people loyal ultimately. So what I suppose, going back to what Craig was saying earlier about building up people for the job that they actually ultimately want, what you want is for someone to move on. They do it because they have a sense of pride, not because it's a relief to get out of the company as quickly as they possibly can. So having these exit interviews and analysing it for patterns and trends and making sure they're actioned is actually more than, you know, just treating it like a really sort of polite way of a closure for someone. If you analyze the information properly, exit interviews can actually reveal deep systemic issues. So when you look at what Craig was saying, is actually, is there favoritism? Is there a workload imbalance? Are there toxic behaviors? Are there broken communication channels? And if you continue to ignore them, it's a bit like, ignoring the glaring yellow warning light on your car dashboard and hoping it goes away until you break down. So a bit like the recruitment phase, we should essentially implement standardized exit feedbacks using structured questions, analyze the data, make sure that we're looking at it trends by role, location, the managers, and share those findings with the leadership and agree actions on sort of what you're actually going to do to respond to those, not just like token gestures ultimately, but essentially communicating a you said we did kind of a scenario to the wider team. We learned this, and this is what we've done to try and change it, as opposed to just burying your head in the sand. And I think what this does is it creates this it demonstrates a sort of element of accountability and transparency, and not just sort of hiding things. So when people see that people learn, or the management learn from people leaving their organization, trust actually then grows from people who choose to stay, and it reframes that feeling of someone leaving from a loss to actually a learning opportunity. And it just shows again that culture isn't static, but it's always evolving, and that there's always a genuine reflection and a structured response.
I think it's like anything, Hell, isn't it? If you're collecting data and not doing anything with it, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's important. And there's also another thing that I was working with the university not that long ago, right? And I went in to speak to one of the managers, because there's two issues. Now this isn't about the interview process, but it's just something that sort of could fall into the same process, which is do you have a meeting to see why they're staying, right? But I went into this particular team. They had, I think it was 11 members of the team. And this manager said to me, oh, we've got a really established team. So we opened 14 years ago and every single person's still here. And my thought process was straight away, I was like, so you haven't developed anyone to be good enough to leave. Right. So you've got these two balances, haven't you? The culture might be, it's that lovely that no one wants to leave because no one's getting pushed, no one's getting stretched, and the people are just happy to sit there and take the money for what they're doing. So there's a load of things that come out of this, right? So I think that's really key. If you can all give the ladies a round of applause. We said we'd have this bit finished by 10 past, and 3 minutes I don't think is bad to go over by 3 minutes. So if you can give Helen and Libby a little bit of a little clap, just a little online clap, that'd be lovely.
Thank you.
Now, what we're going to do after this, so at the minute what I'm showing you here is a group which is you're all going to be invited to. So Teams creates these communities. Right now, you can only do this with a personal email. We tried it yesterday. Basically, if you haven't got a personal Teams account, just click on. If you've got a Google account, just click on that, and it will create one for you. And you'll be invited to this group. So this is the place where that document that you've just seen, that's where this is going to get shared. Right now, if there's any more questions going forward in the future, I've tried this sort of. Someone goes away and does the audit and wants to give us some feedback. Absolutely key. I've done this audit on my business, and we have changed how we do things already, right? So honestly, God, it's so powerful. So this is the group you're going to be invited to. There'll be a link sent to you probably within an hour and a half of the session finishing. There'll be a little mop-up of what we covered. There'll be a copy of the video in case you want to show any other members of staff, and you'll get a link to join this community. This will be sent across. Now, what's really important for this is some of the stuff that we didn't really speak is how to measure these things. Now, it's sort of come out in some of the conversations, Liv and Helen, which is good, right? But in here, what we've tried to do is so when it says crucial conversations, trainings provided. So 1, no training at all happens. 3, ad hoc every now and again if someone asks for it. 3, brief mention in broader training, minimal skill development. Some crucial conversations training, but it's not mandatory. So probably 30–40% of people. And 5 is everyone gets it and it's brilliant. But what you'll see after that is a little bit of what good would look like in the organization. So this bit on the end is really, really powerful. when you get this, there's a little idea of how to use it, that type of stuff, and the cultural audits bits and pieces are in there. Hopefully you've enjoyed the session. There is an option if anyone wants to take us up on this. There is going to be an option where you can, if you wanted to do one of these audits and get some professional feedback on the audit that you did, you don't have to go for this, but the idea behind it is if you wanted to, we've got a group called Ops Excellence, and you could fill in. I'm gonna create this audit so it's online, so you could basically get a code. You would come in, you would start to fill it out, and then what happens is that Libby or Helen would be able to give you some feedback on the next steps, what you should probably do next, all that type of stuff, right? So if you want to take this to another level and go and actually do the audit, then the ladies will spend some time to make sure that you get some proper feedback on the next steps of what you should be doing in your business. I think the key behind this Ops Excellence session is hopefully you realize we're not trying to sell anything to you. You know, that audit, if you want to do it digitally, you can. If you just want to take the paper one and go and do it on yourselves, knock yourselves out. We would love feedback off yourselves. You know, if someone's gone back and thought, right, we've added this in because we thought this was missing, you know, we've rabbited at your ear for 2.5 hours, haven't we? So it's been hard for you to sort of get a word in, especially with Helen. She doesn't have to talk, doesn't she? But so the key behind it, I know I do. So yeah, any feedback you can give us, this is absolutely essential. Look, we're doing all this for absolutely nothing. We're doing this for the love of the industry because we want people to get this best practice. You know, there won't be any pitching based on anything that we've done. So if anybody wants that link, send me an email back. I'll send you a link. You'll basically get a copy of this. You will then basically pop it into your browser and you'll then answer it. And the way that this works is you would give yourself a score and then you would write down why you've given yourself that score. But what we've built into this is the answers and the questions and bits and pieces up there, right? But if you don't, like I say, if you just want to use the paper version, that's fine. I will also create a link. Sorry, I've got me. I'll take that off now. I'll start speaking to humans again. I will also create a link for those questions if anyone wants it. So reply to me and I'll send you I think it's 250 questions to help with one-to-ones, anything like that. You know, and I have one massive ask, please. You know, we've dedicated, I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 days worth to get it to this level so we could bring it to you all free of charge. I know you've kindly given us your time, and look, I'm amazed that we've still got 20 organizations still on after all the time that we've been through today. That is absolutely amazing. So thank you very, very much for that. And someone else is coming back in. Let's just go down hands on it. One thing I would love you to do, if possible, especially if you've enjoyed the session, is could you put a post onto somewhere like LinkedIn, right, and tell people what the session was like, you know, the fact that it was free and why you've enjoyed it. You know, I've got this big problem at the minute. We've got 85 people in our Ops Excellence LinkedIn group, right? But it's like the little Scouse fellas trying to sell this to people. I don't want to do this. If this is beneficial and you want us to, any topic that you want, I've said that I'm going to, for the next 3 years, whatever topic you want, I will do a session for you absolutely free of charge. I'll get in some amazing professionals like we have done for today. The next one we're doing is on health and safety. We've got one in in December, early December, which is on sales and how to get yourself prepared for the busy time of year. Now, I know universities, you just had yours, but loads of people will come in as well. So don't have a go. You've just got more time to prep for next September. But the key behind this whole message or this whole thing that we're trying to do is I've got a load of professionals like Libby and like Helen who are willing to help our industry to get better at what we do. And honest to God, I didn't realize how much of a full-time job this was going to be, putting all this together and trying to create all the sessions and make sure that you get all the feedback and all the communities and stuff are done. One thing I hope you'll realize is that, look, there will never be any pitching, there'll never be any sponsorship, there'll never be any sales. Every single session that you ever come on will be us creating something that you've asked for. So please, please, please do put something on social media and let other people know. That's how this ripple effect is going to get out more, because look, the people are fed up listening to the little Scouse fella bang on. I'll tell you they are. But hopefully you know, how have you found it? Does anyone, how's today been? Look, you've gladly stayed on for us, but has anyone got anything from it? Is anyone going to do the audit on themselves? So Jeanette, thank you. She's enjoyed it. That's amazing. Thank you. But yeah, what's your feedback on what we've done? Quality session. Love it, Christoph. The insight and personal experience will be doing the audits in the coming weeks to hit the ground running for 2026. Amazing, mate. Honest to God, Chris, you'll change stuff. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that, look, we're not doing all them things, right? And we haven't got fives for them all, right? So yeah, please, yeah, it's amazing. Look, it's nice to know that the feedback that's coming through is lovely. So, you know, thank you very, very much for that.
Can I just say something, Craig? Yeah. Just a quickie, just to say, you know, you've thanked myself and Libby, which we really appreciate, but I think we all need to say a big thank you to Craig, because if it wasn't for Craig, then none of this would be pulled together, and he does a hell of a lot of work behind the scenes with Dornan's help, I think, but essentially, you know, we need to say a big thank you to Craig and for all of his hard work and efforts and time that he puts into doing all of this. So thank you.
Yeah, well, if you want to thank me by putting a post on social media, that'll be the nicest thank you I could ever have, because I would love to do this type of thing. I'd love to have 100 organisations on, right? To me, that's what the more people we can touch with this, the more the best practice will come in, and the more the questions and the bits and pieces. I'd love loads of questions to come into the community. You know, the ladies, I'm sure they're in there. They'll answer questions if they can. I'll answer every single question that goes in there. I'll make sure it gets an answer, whether that's off one of the ladies or whether that's just off the little Scouse fella. But thank you for your time. You will all get a follow-up email, and yeah, I think to keep 20 organisations engaged on a 3-hour webinar is pretty tough going. So I'm made up that the feedback in is great. I would like to thank Libby and Helen myself. So I've enjoyed this whole process of building it, like I did when we did the pool one last time, and I'm about to do the next one with Jill Twell, who's a health and safety expert. But we've got so many professionals in this industry who are willing to help you lot. And look, if any of you've all got skills. Jason, you're doing really, really well with the way you do all your operations, and I know that, you know, Ross, I've spoke to you in the past. Alex, you've popped in some really good things. If any of you want to become involved and want to become one of the professionals that helps other people to help the industry free of charge, just let me know, and I'll snap your hand off, because any help I can get, I'm willing to take. Right, I think it's time for us to finish, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much for your time. Thanks. Like you say, whack it on socials. Go on, be nice. And book yourselves, or get your teams to book onto the next ones that we do. It'll all be over LinkedIn and stuff. And if you're not already in the Ops Excellence LinkedIn group, just type in Ops Excellence. I will let you in. As long as you're an operator, you get in. If you're trying to sell something, you're not. But yeah, you're welcome. Peeps, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll speak soon. Helen and Libby will stay on.
Thanks, Craig. That was awesome. And Helen, Libby, brilliant. Loads of stuff there.
Thanks, Alex.
You.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Okay, so I'm not sure. Michael Chadwick is on hold. I just need to take Michael out, not as in sniper.
You've got a specific set of skills.
Now, we won't talk too much because on this bit, but can we just have a quick catch up on another call? Only because this is getting recorded, so I don't want to. Yep. If we stop this, and then if I send you both a quick link now, and then we'll jump back on just for 5 minutes, is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. See you in a minute.